What's up, YouTube? Let's do this.
They look so radical. Hearing your words, they sound fanatical. Something inside reveals you're magical. Oh, how can I get enough? You're a strange animal. That's what I know. But you're a strange animal. I got to follow. Stick a line in your system, analyzing the defenses you hold, trying to open wide, hoping to step inside your soul. But everything here is unfamiliar. Nothing they've seen remotely similar. How can it be you're so peculiar? Oh, how can I get enough? You're a strange animal. That's what I know. But you're a strange animal. I got to follow. Whoa. To follow, I got to follow. You're a strange animal, I got to follow. Oh, I'm in the spiritus. Wow. Oh, you're a strange animal, that's what I know. You're a strange animal, I got to follow. Wow. You're a strange animal, that's what I know. But you're a strange animal, I got to follow. Oh, I'm in the spiritus. Oh, you're a strange animal, that's what I know. But you're a strange animal, I got to follow.
There it is. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Squatch Talk. I'm Pat, and tonight, yep, we're going there. We're going to get into some interesting evidence that has turned up and that could actually lead somewhere. So we're going to get all into all that. With me tonight is Jeff Harding. I'm going to bring him on here in a second. And he's been working with Doug Hychak, examining Bigfoot hair, what they think is Bigfoot hair. And there's a compelling case there to be made that it could be. And some interesting discoveries that could actually move the ball down the field. So we're talking about the real potential real evidence that is sort of in its infancy, but it is very interesting. So I'm gonna bring Jeff in now. Hey Jeff, how you doing tonight?
Good. How are you, Pat?
I'm fine, man. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Yeah. So, I guess, dude, let's start talking about how you and Doug sort of discovered this and what's happening and what's going on, and then maybe like later we can maybe start theorizing about what that means, or what some of the more theoretical stuff. But where are we actually at? What did you guys find?
Well, to preface the discussion, I think it's just important to say that like you said, this is in its infancy. This is something that's been happening over the last just couple of weeks is all. And it's kind of a big deal. We think it's going to turn into a real big deal. But where we're at with it is like you said, the infancy stages of what we're discovering, still figuring out what are we actually looking at here? What are we finding out? And so, rather than waiting a year until we think we know exactly what it is, we're taking everybody kind of on the journey with us here and sharing what we found, because it is helpful if we ask other people to examine hairs in some of the ways that we're doing it. You don't really need a big scientific lab to figure out some of the stuff that we're seeing. And it would be really helpful, because so far we're talking about specimens up here in northern Minnesota where we're at, right? A couple different research sites, different individuals that we believe we're capturing these DNA follicles from. It's not the same one. So we've got several that we're dealing with. And what we're noticing is things that the next step would be, are these same characteristics happening in samples from, let's say, Washington State or Florida, or things like that, So it's important to say we're developing a theory. We're not presenting a fact here. We're not trying to speak from a factual standpoint. We're simply sharing what we're finding, and it is pretty remarkable. So Doug, as you know, he's got a live camera system set up in Minnesota on a very active property. It's one that's been well documented over the last year and a half. There's a lot of videos that he's put out on it. And they've got several individual Bigfoot there that they have had interactions with. And they've designed elements to capture DNA specimens like hair and sebum samples, skin oil samples, prints, things like that. And they get a lot of interaction. They have a lot of technology in their site, cameras, audio recorders, things like that. And, we don't know what Bigfoot's capable of sensing. So, maybe they'd have more results if they didn't have that. So we developed another research site that I've been tending for 5 months now. It's very remote, way up in northern Minnesota. I have to kayak about 8 miles to get into it, and then I leave items designed to collect DNA. And then the next day, after a 24-hour window, I kayak back into that area and collect those items, photo them, take the samples, we collect them. If they're sebum samples, we swab them, and we're developing a library of what we believe to be Bigfoot hair samples and sebum samples to have correctly tested for the
Mhm.
Legend Meets Science 2 documentary.
Right.
So these aren't hairs that we're just finding, on a trail somewhere or whatever. We've designed items to collect hair samples through interaction. So a couple weeks ago, I will say, before me and Doug really even started working research together, one of the things that brought us together, other than that we're geographically right next to each other here in Minnesota, was that I had a background in UV technology and did a lot of work with black lights and fluorescence and UV light spectrum and things like that prior to leaving that industry and getting into the real estate world. So when we started talking about could Bigfoot see in a UV light spectrum, he felt that I brought a lot to the table of the conversation just because I could share with him things that I perceived in dealing with UV light and reactions, fluorescent reactions and things. But lately, a couple of weeks ago, he calls me up. It's about 1 a.m. We both spend midnight to like 4 a.m. working on stuff. That's usually when we're communicating, me and Doug. And he burns the midnight oil all the time. He sees I'm online, calls me up at 1 a.m. and says, "Dude, do you have a blacklight flashlight there right now?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Go get one of your hair samples. Go out into your workbench area in the garage where you can get it really dark, and put a UV light on the hair sample. And with your naked eye, there'll be no reaction. You won't see anything. But our eyes have a UV filter in them. Okay, if that makes sense. Somebody who's had cataract surgery actually gets those removed. Okay, but the human eye has the ability to filter some UV light. So as I'm shining a black light on this, I see it you see the light purple hue on the hair follicle, but I mean, nothing's reacting in a fluorescent way. And he says, now take your camera, your phone, turn the camera on and aim it at the hair follicle, which would be removing that filter. The camera's looking at it from a negative perspective without any UV filter in it. And the thing's lit up like fluorescent pink.
So it was a dramatic change. Then
it was like it was looking like a neon sign, the tube lighting on a neon beer sign or something.
Right.
Fluorescent pink. I mean, the hair follicle was fluorescent pink, like electric pink. Okay. And I said, "What kind of cameras have you tested this with yet?" And he said, "I've tested it with my phone. I've tested it with a 4K high def camera. I've tested it with high speed camera." Same reaction. Now, it's just to describe to you what we're seeing from the follicle, like on the sample I had at the time was about 8 inches long. So from the follicle to the tapered end, this hair that I've got, some of them are different from each other, the different hair samples. I've got several of them, but this one was, you could see, in regular light, it looks translucent and see-through almost all the way through it. But there are sections of it where it looks clear, and there's sections of it where it looks like watered down bourbon, kind of a bourbon color. And then it goes back to clear. And so you need to understand that when that hollow core in that follicle, where they're in most primates and animals, mammals, they have medulla in there. There's a solid core to it. Bigfoot hair is not identical to polar bear hair, where that's completely hollow like a straw, but there are little concentrations of some medulla in it, and that's where you start seeing colorations. But for the most part, it's translucent the whole way. Even where there's color to a hair, you should be able to kind of see through it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so the pink would be radiantly pink for an inch or two. And then there'd be a 3/4 inch section where it would kind of not quite as intense. And then it would get intense again further down the follicle. But we were seeing as fluorescent pink. And so right away, I got to go in and grab the rest of my hair samples. And I'm sitting out there with rubber gloves on, looking at each sample, and every one of them's lighting up. And then I'm pulling hair out of my own head, checking it, and it doesn't light up. and I run in and grab deer off of my mount that I have inside, a hair off of a deer, and I'm checking that and it don't glow. And I told Doug, I said, how many hairs have you tested? And he says, well, I've looked at about 10 or 12, and even his hair, we joke about it. His hair, he's silver. He has no medulla in his hair.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So he said, even my hair doesn't glow pink. And so I'm like, okay, we got to figure this out. So I went to a taxidermist. A friend of mine has a big taxidermy shop. I got hairs from about 84 different mammals and brought them back and started testing them. And I mean, this was labor intensive. It took about a week. I'm videoing it, checking out each one, documenting which specimen it is, what mammal it is, showing it. I have to test it with multiple cameras just to make sure I'm not missing something. And through this testing, we've discovered, and some of this was known. We've since then, after we discovered it, found a research paper that said this animal's hair seems to be fluorescent under black light. So Bigfoot isn't the only one, we would say, that is like this, okay? And I'm not even saying all Bigfoot are like it, because like we said, Pat, we're only testing a couple specimens here from northern Minnesota.
Right.
I can't speak from even, we're developing a theory. I can't even say this is our theory. We're still developing this theory, really.
Well, so what I'm going to do is, guys, I do have video of this phenomena happening. So
Doug tested a clump of hairs. I think you've got a video of it.
It's documented, and I'm going to play that now, just while we're talking, and before we start getting into the other stuff, with other species. But I'm just going to go ahead and share that now and see if I can get that rolling. I think I can. Everybody see that? Yeah. Okay. And so that is the phenomena right there. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah. It doesn't light up pink in the in kind of that side glow of it. You really have to be on it and it fires up pink. But if you were doing this, I wish you would have taken some video of human hair doing this. There is no pink reaction when you're doing this. They just look like dense lines laying on that glass.
Yeah, and that's an easy experiment to
I see
anybody could do this experiment with their own hair right now.
And I see
they have a UV flashlight. Yeah.
Patrick Vaughn had asked if these taxidermy samples were tanned hair on. So just to let you know, we were taking samples from frozen specimens, and we did get a couple samples from animals that had been mounted that were tanned hair on, but we tried to collect as many samples as we could, and we're still collecting samples. We're still doing this. So one of the animals a couple animals that we found that will glow pink like this, other than these suspected Bigfoot hairs, seem to be nocturnal animals, and not all nocturnal animals will do it. We've tested nocturnal animals that don't do it, but the very few that happen to be nocturnal animals, and they live in darkness. So a flying squirrel, we've realized that it does this, and we have a lot of flying squirrels around here. We've actually got a video, our live cams that Doug's running, 9 live cams. We've got dozens and dozens of flying squirrels, both whacking the camera, landing on trees in front of the camera. But so now we're getting a flying squirrel specimen. We're going to test so that we can show it. I mean, I don't want to take a research paper's word for it. I want to see it. And a couple of the other animals were possums. Possum hair will light up pink, and ground gophers, like pocket gophers. They live in tunnels underground 90% of their life, and some of their longer hairs will glow pink. But I mean, we've tested, to this point, between me and him, we've tested over 100 hair samples from different mammals, and we aren't seeing this in almost any of them. So now you have to correlate that with the theory that me and Doug have been working towards for a while is, can Bigfoot see in a UV light spectrum?
Right. So before we get to that, see, I just want to be clear. I just want to be clear where we're at. You and Doug are both collecting hair samples from the wild, basically, that you believe to be Bigfoot. Right. Fair
Yeah,
enough.
yeah,
But
yeah.
and because of where they're found and how they're collected, we'll get into that too. But it's a purposeful search for that specific hair. And so, I mean, of
Yeah.
course, the first thing people are going to do is, well, I mean, obviously, you didn't walk up to a Bigfoot, and say, "Hey, sorry, bud," and you didn't, you didn't do that. So,
No.
how do you know if it's Bigfoot hair? Again, we'll get into those techniques.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm just trying to say you and Doug's confidence is high on that, right?
I would, and both him and I have had this conversation that even specimens that we are as confident as if we would have walked up to a Bigfoot and clipped it up, I still
Right.
would only represent it at about 95% sure.
Sure. So, in other words,
Because I got to leave room for error. I didn't clip it off of a Bigfoot.
right. But the point is that either way, you guys already felt like you had hair that you were confident that you felt you got from a Bigfoot. And then at the same time, that exact same hair sample is doing this anomaly where it is under UV light. It's creating a glow. Remember now, people, on camera.
Yeah.
So you can't see it with your eyes until you look through the viewing screen through a camera filter.
So the verbiage Doug would use is that when we look at these hairs by removing a filter, okay, and the filter he's saying we're removing is in our own human eyes, okay,
right?
We can only perceive what we see, but when we remove that filter and start looking at it through a camera lens that's unfiltered,
and
it reacts.
And just to reiterate, because Leon's asking, it was filmed on multiple devices, right? This anomaly.
Yeah, we filmed it on cell phones. We filmed it on 4K, 4 different 4K video cameras, and still cameras. It shows up in stills and on video. We've filmed it with a high-speed camera. We've slowed down high-speed footage of it, ultra slow, to see if we could catch frames where it's glowing and not, so that what we're trying to find out there is this a fluorescent reaction or is it a reflection, if that makes sense?
Right.
Okay. An item could give off, because of something embedded or, part of that item could give off a reaction, a UV fluorescent reaction. But then there's a possibility that it could be the surface of it and light hitting it weird and it's a reflection, okay? And we're still not confident which one of those it could be. I think it's more probable that it's a reflection than a reaction. But, I don't have the type of lab to split one of these hairs open and take inner core samples out of it, and just on that sample outside of the follicle, just microscopically scrape the residue in that core out and just look at that without it being in a follicle. Would it do it? If it did, now you're looking at a reaction rather than a reflection. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
but there are people that could do that, right?
There's people that could do it. Like I say, I mean, we just figured we just figured out we're looking at something weird 2 weeks ago. So
right, yeah, no, I'm just
probably part of the LMS2 documentary is going to take a little bit of a turn. We're not just looking at we're not just looking at DNA at that point and baselining DNA from multiple samples. Now we're trying to solve the phenomena of why does it do this.
Yes, and so that's where I was sort of projecting the into the future there is that, what needs to happen, and I'm sure Doug will do this, and again, and make it part of, Legend Meets too, but is that, man, this stuff needs to go on towards other professionals and other scientists who have that capability to study it. And obviously, dude, if everything is like sort of like is on the up and up to the point where we're at here, they're going to find this pretty interesting, because they'll also be able to look at this hair and go, well, it's not human. Right?
It's another compelling component for them to have a reason to take a look at it,
Mm-hmm. And that will be a lot. That won't be as expensive as the DNA stuff, I would imagine, dude.
Probably not. The same labs that test the DNA, maybe not in that actual lab, but in that same facility, they'll have the equipment to do it. I was just looking at our radar here. It's starting to sprinkle a little bit.
Yeah, are you outside? Or are you not?
Yeah, I am, but I got a covered porch. I can move.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it's one of those deals where we have to approach this with, cautiously optimistic. What are we looking at here? We don't want to get in front of ourselves and trying to interpret what we're observing. We have to do it from a scientific approach. And right now, it's one of those things that if somebody at home or anybody in our live chat thinks that they have hair that they've collected that they believe could likely be Bigfoot hair, this isn't something you need a lab to test. Go get a UV flashlight and shine it on it and look at it with your camera and see if you get a pink reaction. Now, there's two different things. One could be that you find out you don't have a Bigfoot hair, but just because it doesn't react doesn't mean that you don't have a Bigfoot hair. It may be that Bigfoot don't do it all over,
Right. So yeah.
I mean, it's just what we're noticing here in Minnesota. So
sure. So yeah, again, people, one of the biggest things that's going to be critiqued right out of the gate, here is going to be, well, how do you know you have Bigfoot hair? So tell me about the collection methods and also the actual physicality of the hair itself. So tell me how you collect it and describe it physically, besides the glowing thing. Uh-oh. And you there, bud?
Yeah. Well, the way that we collect it is, hold on just a second here, Pat. I'll tell you what, just a minute while I kind of relocate here because that stuff's kind of freezing up here a little bit.
Yeah.
Give me just a second while I get this plugged back in here.
Sure. Yeah, man. No problem, man. Right, we got some theories pouring in, which is good. And I think that's sort of everybody's thinking on theoretical, like, why would this be? Why the glowing thing? Well, I don't know what Joe's show is about tonight, but man, come on, this one's more interesting. At least tonight. Joe's just gonna have to concede. Like, this is serious stuff, guys. I've known about this for a minute, and this is actual interesting evidence, that can head in a very, very positive direction for knowledge, or something better than another set of footprints, that's for sure. Right? Hopefully we'll get Jeff back here in a minute, and I'm sure he'll figure it out. And yeah, I know that's Yeah, I know. I know Jeff talked about this sort of spontaneously on Mog's show last night, and but I've known about it, and see, the thing is that um, Doug went public with it what, two or three nights ago on oh, there goes Jeff. He'll come back. Doug went public with it I believe 2 nights ago on She Squatchers. He started talking about it spontaneously, and I was like, "Oh, all right, Doug's talking about it in public. Like, we're good. Now we can talk about this finally." Um because it is fascinating. Um and this again, man, there's got to be a reason why that's happening, and what that hair is. Now, this is, Jeff and Doug saying they've tried it with human hair, or at least their own hair. I don't know how much other human hair they've collected and tried to replicate that, and they're saying it's not happening with human hair. So again, man, if that continues, and we do 100 samples or 1,000 samples with human hair and never get that result, man, that's powerful evidence. Very, very powerful evidence that can be followed to some kind of conclusions, not just theory, not just this is interesting, but an actual conclusion. All right, man. Cool. Thanks for stopping by. Glad you were here. No, yeah, Blackbeard saying this could mean nothing. It could mean nothing about what Bigfoot sees, just a coincidence, and that's true. That's true. And it's going to be, even this it can only go so far with that, without like pairing it with understanding how Bigfoot, how their optics work, which would pretty much take an autopsy. I think, I don't know, there might be some UV experiments you could do in the woods. I don't know. Was he? If he was, let me know. Send me a link, Donald. I would like to see that. Yeah, so Leon, they okay. Yeah, so I've lost Jeff. Like, his internet is bad right now, or his cell phone signal. He said rain was moving into the area. Hopefully he'll come back. But yeah, he did say, so we started getting into that, and we covered it for a minute, that that both Jeff and Doug Highcheck believed that they had collected Bigfoot hair samples. And so the way of doing that, this is about where we were about to go when I lost Jeff. But the two different ways, or two main ways, is that Doug has this thing, man, about power poles in remote areas, or slightly remote areas, in cut lines. The older wooden style ones, so the older hydro lines. He was finding these clumps of hair like 8 feet up them, and speculating, man, these things are they're scratching their backs on this. And so he's like, a bear wouldn't do this. really the only other candidate. So he started finding them in those places and collecting them. Now, what Jeff does is this way more elaborate thing. Is that he kayaks out like 20 miles or something. I don't know, like some crazy amount in the woods into a remote area where he thinks that where he's got an activity. Let's just say, basically, and so he goes out to this remote area that he kayaks to, and he is there. He'll start playing with this big plastic ball, and he'll just play with it by himself, sort of assuming that he's being observed, and when he'll play with the ball all by himself, and I'll pull it up real quick, and this ball has Velcro on it, so this is kind of genius. Like, I like it. Let's see, no Chrome tab, Facebook. Where? No, I don't want to share that. Or do I? Sorry, guys. Yeah, that. So he'll play with this ball, and it has Velcro, these Velcro markers on it. And then he'll come back either the next day or sometime later, and of course he'll find the ball will be in a different location, whatever, right? But he'll find hair on the Velcro, and so that's sort of his primary way of collecting what he thinks is a Bigfoot hair. And so these are the hairs. The methods of collection were what I told you, at least mainly, about being, clumps of it being 8 feet up a power pole, which is kind of weird. And then this thing where, the whole Velcro from the ball. So those are the methods of collection, and these are the hairs that they're testing. These are the hairs that are doing the anomaly, the anomalous. Why the hell is it glowing? It should, there are no other hairs that glow really, except for there are other species that Jeff did mention, flying squirrel being one of them. I think maybe possum, which that's interesting because that's 2 different species. Possum's a marsupial. And then I think he said maybe groundhog. So rodents and 2 rodents and a marsupial. Kind of interesting. But yeah, that's Jeff's method. Now he could, I'm sure he would make it a lot more compelling than I just did. I just sort of gave a book report on it, but yeah, that's cool, tactical. I think once they discovered this, man, they probably got real excited about it and wanted to start running it by some people. And I'm glad they did, because the initial vetting should be done that way. And I've looked into it as much as I can. It's so far out of my area of expertise with how UV light interacts with things, and I don't know anything about animal hair at all. I just know it's time for a haircut for me, but so yeah, I don't have the expertise. I mean, I guess I could research some of it, but it's really cool that, that this is starting, now to come out. And, I know Doug's he's going to bring it up tomorrow in his presentation. He's at a conference right now in Minnesota. And so he's going to be talking about that tomorrow. Sort of the official public release, I guess, of this this evidence or potential evidence. You know, like, look, for me personally, dude, like, as far as like any kind of like hoax word going out here, like, this is a hoax. Like, I don't see it. Doug's reputation is on the line. And again, we're talking about this in a reasonable, if not hopeful way, but we're trying to be reasonable and have the right kind of discussion about this. And Jeff's back. Yay, dude. Hey, bud.
Apologize about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, man, you're good.
Yeah, it started raining like hell wouldn't have it here, so I had to pull everything. We didn't even have rain in the forecast, so that kind of blows me away. But
Just kind of snuck up on you.
boy, it was sprinkling a little bit. I thought, oh, maybe I'll stop. And then no, it really got going. But
yeah, so I just kind of got well, Leon, oh god. So here come the questions, man.
You bet.
Well, I just explained you and Doug's primary ways of collecting hair, how you do it, and why you think it's Bigfoot hair. Basically, the Velcro ball, remote location, and then Doug with the with the 8-foot
Power poles.
yeah, the 8-foot poles, clumps of hair, which which is kind of weird. That's very weird, odd to me. But
Yeah.
Leon's saying, so maybe you can address this. Maybe you know something that I don't know or we don't know. Leon's saying a hair doesn't stick to Velcro. Try it at home.
Yeah, if you look at the picture of the ball, the hair follicle that's in the Velcro, we use a very coarse hook and loop Velcro. It's not a fine one like you would see on like a tonneau cover of a truck, you know. And
yeah, I kind of agree with that. Hair will stick to Velcro. Like I don't. And this particular piece of Velcro it does look very coarse to me. I'll pull it back up real quick for everybody to see. Like, yeah. Like, yep. That's a hair.
yeah. And, you know, we've got some other methods that we collect hair with too. I mean, we use, I have a game camera that I don't put in my research area. It's very low tech. It's different than the other research areas we have. We have one controlled area we've been doing for 5 months where we bring no cameras, no audio, no anything powered. Okay. No IR emitting devices. Even when I walk into it every Thursday and put items into the area, and then I come back on Friday and collect them out, I leave my phone in my kayak. I don't carry anything out there. I have one camera that is a 35 millimeter film point and click camera, just in case something stepped right in front of me, you know. But
Right.
I don't carry any electronic devices in there because I don't claim to know what Bigfoot is capable of sensing. But since I don't know that, I'm not going to take any chances. This was an area that was designed to leave intriguing items that they would find interesting. We were going to invoke our fluorescent blue theme to some of the items to see if we could, you know, expand on our theory that maybe they can see in a UV light spectrum. And in doing that, like I have a game camera that I've painted fluorescent blue. It's not camouflage. And sometimes I'll hang it on trees, sometimes I won't. But it's not powered up. There's no batteries in it. I'm trying to get them used to seeing a game camera, right? And but on the very bottom edge of that, I'll take a postal tape that I've cut like 1/4 width, so it's only about 1/2 inch wide instead of 2 inches wide. And I'll tape it onto it, and then I'll roll it back on itself and wrap 5 strands around it so it's sticky side up, and I'll just leave that camera lay there, and it'll get picked up and moved. And when I come back, it's been moved and there's hair stuck on the tape. I mean, we just have different ways that we kind of feel that Bigfoot's weakest link is its curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to try to exploit that. And, that site was designed so that 5 months of weekly interaction. I don't know if these individuals if they habitate near there or if it's 30 miles from there, but they know every Thursday I come in and leave stuff that they want. And every Friday I come and pick it up and take it out. And so wherever they're at, whatever their routine is, they've made me part of their routine with this area. I don't know where they are Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but Thursday, as I'm kayaking in, a lot of times they'll be wood knocking and escorting me right into the area as I'm coming up the river. But we go out and we leave items that are designed we'll take baby food jars, put a polished rock in it, screw the lid on, and I'll take that and set it in front of a fluorescent blue game camera on a tree, and we'll come back and that lid's gone and the rock's taken. And that's not a bear, it's not a deer, and there's no humans in this area. Now, what took the rock? I can say I'm 95% sure it was a Bigfoot. But, I can't say that somebody didn't helicopter into there and find the jar and took the rock to play a joke on me. But if that's the case, out of 5 months, okay, I mean, we've got 31 weeks of getting into this area and leaving stuff. There's been 4 weeks of those 31 weeks that stuff hasn't been interacted with. So right. I mean, if it's somebody playing a joke, they're as dedicated as I am to get into it.
Elaborate joker.
It is pretty.
That's kind of absurd, actually.
Yeah. I mean, but like I said, I can't say I'm 100% sure. I mean, I have to say I'm 95% sure this is a Bigfoot hair specimen. This is a sebum sample. On that ball thing that you shared, the picture of the ball, you can actually see the sebum samples on there. There's sebum smears on that ball.
So, they're asking, about the flying squirrels, and so that hair does react similarly.
Yeah. Actually, the entire every hair on the damn squirrel reacts that way.
So, were you guys able to test that yourselves somehow?
Well, the first thing that we did was we were researching from other scientists and asking a community of scientists that we've worked with from the lab is anybody aware of this? What mammals would have a fluorescent reaction or a reflection to UV light? And somebody said, hey, there's been research papers wrote on flying squirrels. And then as we read that, we realized that in that research paper, it notes that possums and ground squirrels, and we start drawing this correlation. These are creatures that primarily exist in the dark, And
are you guys gonna try and catch one?
Well, I told Doug, let's go out and shoot one. I mean, they're all over the place, but then I started realizing I don't know if I can shoot one. They're pretty damn quick. I mean, they're faster than a clay pigeon.
Yeah.
And so Doug got on eBay and found a mounted one for $65 and ordered it from a taxidermist. Now, I don't know if that's been tanned or if it has endured some type of a chemical process in the mounting process that would affect that. I can't believe that it would. In my mind, even if it's been tanned, it's likely that if it was able to fluoresce when it was alive, it could probably still do it. But even if it did do it, then I guess you can say check that box off that animal does. If it didn't do it, now I've got to figure out if there was something in the tanning process that affected
it. I don't know. What's tanning? I don't know what that is.
Well, it's like leather. Okay, you take cattle leather, you take the hair off the cow and you tan the leather, right? Well, when you stretch an animal fur over a foam core mount to recreate that stuffed animal, it's a foam core in it, or a certain kind of core, a fiber core. And that when they depult off the dead body of the animal, they not the fur side, but the bottom side, they treat with chemicals, and it's called a tanning process, right?
Okay.
And it stretches it, it makes it pliable. I mean, if you just let it dry out, it'd be stiff like a board, okay? So it makes it pliable and plush so that they can mount it now over a foam core and recreate that animal using its fur. I don't know if in that process you could, if it would affect what we're seeing on these hairs. It could, you know, but, you know, one of the ways to test it, I guess, would be to find either a possum, a ground squirrel, or what we've ordered, a flying squirrel. And now that it's been mounted and through the taxidermy process, does it still do it? You know, we're going to find that out.
Okay. A possum wouldn't be too hard to catch. I wouldn't.
No, I've got one in my backyard. He comes on my bird feeder every night. I mean, it'd be really, I've actually caught him before.
Well, hell, dude, with that, bro, all you have to do is go outside with your UV flashlight and film it, right? Like,
Well, yeah, I'd have to film it. I'd have to shine it with the light while I'm filming it. But actually, I can catch one overnight in a live trap here.
right. You can trap
I
one.
can put some peanut butter in a live trap and hopefully not get a skunk and get a possum.
Yeah.
I had something in my garage one time because my teenage kid didn't shut the garage door overnight. And I could hear it out there every night, knocking shovels over and stuff. So I set a live trap out there. This is 2 years ago. And the next morning, I heard that thing snap shut at night. And I thought, God, please don't be a skunk in there. I mean, how am I going to walk up to it without spraying me? And I go out and look, and there was a possum in there. And I brought it outside and let it go. But, I mean, all I did was put a little bit of peanut butter in it, and I caught it. I would think if I sit outside, I could probably catch a possum in one night. There's so many of them around.
Now, here's a good point. Possums eat ticks. So do flying squirrels, I believe. Is that?
Oh, right? Yeah. Now, so that person is on to something there. What we're looking at is, so we have to be careful how we approach this, Pat. We're trying to see what would the correlation be. So if Bigfoot can see in a UV light spectrum, okay, if it can, not saying it can't, and it could see each other in a fluorescent reaction or a reflection. What we're talking about is like looking, you've got experience with looking at heat signatures on drones, right?
Yep.
If you were looking at it in white hot, black hot, right? I mean, just a black and white heat signature. Imagine that they can see it at night in that, and 200 yards away, when they see deer and stuff, they're seeing it in that black-white spectrum. But when they see each other, they see a fluorescent pink. Now, that's assuming that they perceive, their eyes process that reaction or that reflection like our camera does pink. It could be they see it blue or they see it red. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if there is a fluorescent reaction or reflection going on in their coat, and they could see it in a UV light spectrum, it would be easy to identify each other. But it also would be easy to identify flying squirrels, assuming that flying squirrels have this, right? And now you start looking at what you call symbiotic relationships. It occurs in nature a lot of times. There's two versions. There's a chaotic symbiotic relationship, and there's a mutual symbiotic relationship. Chaotic symbiotic relationships, to give you an example, would be like when ravens start circling and alerting, and Bigfoot would see that and know that something's coming into the area, right? It's using the ravens as a way of benefiting itself, but it's really not doing anything for the ravens, okay? It's just utilizing those ravens being useful. That's a chaotic symbiotic relationship. A mutual one would be Doug put video cameras in a beaver den and found that in these beavers were coexisting with muskrats in the beaver lodge. And the muskrats played a very specific role in the hierarchy of how they existed together. The muskrats at night would groom through the beaver's hair and eat the parasites out of their hair and clean them. That was something the muskrat did. The beaver was comfortable letting them do that, And the muskrats did it because they benefited from it too, right? So there you have a mutual symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, and
So
Doug proved that. Doug was the guy that
he
proved it.
that,
Yeah.
that exists in nature a lot of times. You see it with primates cleaning each other, things like that, right? But now let's suppose that Bigfoot lives 24/7, 365 out in the wild for decades, right? During its lifespan. Every night it's in the elements. What if flying squirrels ate the wood ticks off them, and when they land on them, they're fine with that? They're comfortable with that. They might even be able to see them in that light spectrum react the same as they do each other and be comfortable with it. And just kind of a neat little story about something that happened to Doug one night when he was out in one of these areas. He was talking nonstop, and a flying squirrel landed on his shoulder. And when he stopped talking and held still, it left. But when he started talking and making noise again, it came back to him. So the guys he was with said, "Keep talking, Doug. Just keep talking." So Doug just sat there and rambled on till he had 4 or 5 flying squirrels stuck all over him.
You're kidding me.
No.
What?
This has happened.
Did somebody film? Hey, did somebody film that?
Doug will tell. I can tell you this. There's a lot of people that I've learned in this life that when they tell me something, I always approach it with skepticism, at least to some degree, right? Until I can. But very rarely have I heard Doug Hychek tell me something that I could lower the degree of skepticism I use, right? And
no,
when
I
he
hear
told
you,
me this,
I mean,
I doubted it at first until he told me who he was with. And he said they saw it, and that's when I realized, okay, this isn't bullshit. I mean, he wouldn't make this up.
I wasn't accusing Doug of lying.
No,
I'm just like, oh, come on, dude. If you get five freaking flying squirrels land on you, somebody's got to pull out the iPhone and film it, man. So
yeah, maybe
next
they
time.
did. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but I don't think he was expecting to get that reaction when it happened.
Yeah, speaking
but
of which,
whether there was a sonar relational deal with that, because he was making noise, they honed in on that or whatever. But here you can see on one of our live cams this flying squirrel comes flying through. And one of the things that we've noticed on the live cams over weeks and weeks and weeks of doing this, and we've got dozens of video clips of this, is that flying squirrels don't like the cameras. They don't. They actually attack them. We've got pictures just like you saw. He's jumping from next to that camera to that tree and then to another one and back. But we've got him jumping onto that tree and then flying at the camera like it's trying to knock it down.
You're kidding, really? No, oh my God, I want to see that.
And I mean over a dozen clips of squirrels trying to knock it down. But we've also got a couple clips that aren't squirrels. And these cameras, as you can see, are mounted about 8 to 10 feet up in the air on these trees, right?
Yeah.
We don't really there's only a couple of them that are close to ground level. Most of them are way up there looking at a downward angle so that we can eliminate that it was a bear and things like that. They're on trees that aren't big enough to support the weight of a bear climbing up that high, things like that. And we've got a couple video clips. I think I sent you one. It's very quick. It happens right at the beginning of it. But you can see a stick coming from the right. Something clubs that camera with a stick. And this camera's 9 feet in the air. And a ground squirrel can't carry a stick. And there are no humans where this happened. So what took a stick
I'll play
to this camera? Is there a symbiotic relationship between these squirrels and a Bigfoot to where the Bigfoot benefits, the squirrels eat the ground ticks and groom them. And maybe the Bigfoot realizes these squirrels don't like these cameras, so I'm going to take a stick and knock the camera. Because it knocked it completely off the mount and it's hanging there after the stick hits it.
Again, we're speculating.
It's all speculation.
Yeah, that's just speculation. But it is interesting. It is interesting speculation.
Well, the discussion that we're having is, what would be the mutual benefit relationship if there was a symbiotic relation between a Bigfoot and any other creature, right? And it could be just absolutely coincidence that ground squirrels are there that they have a UV reaction or reflection to their fur, and that Bigfoots are there and that they have a UV reaction or reflection in their fur. Could be completely coincidence. There is no relation at all. But you'd have to question, if there was, what would it be? That's all we're doing. We're not claiming anything as a theory.
Yeah, they might just be like, little snacks, pizza roll snacks.
Yeah, it might sit there and let it eat all the ticks off it, and when it's done, it eats the squirrel. Who knows? So just to let you know, Pat, I'm on my iPad now, so I don't have the live chat up. So if there is a question that somebody wants to ask, I'm not reading it. You can just throw it at me.
Yeah, man. I will. I'm trying to keep up and also produce here. Again, I'm gonna play I'm gonna play the shot where you were talking about the camera get hits by a stick, and what was weird to me about it is that it got hit so hard the shot never returned.
No,
I don't know if that camera was taken out or
the camera twisted 90 degrees and fell down. It didn't fall out of the tree. It's still hooked to the mount, but it's aiming into the tree down. And so then the very first second of the video from the right, you can see the stick hitting the camera. And if you scrub it really slow, you'll actually see it come in.
I'll play it in real time first. But okay. So and just like I said, the shot never returns.
No. But now just scrub frame by frame in that first second, and you'll actually see where that stick comes in from the right.
Yeah, I guess I can.
There's one frame where you can see it's the tip of a stick.
Do I know how to scrub?
I think you're way past it because it's going to be in the first 10% of that.
It's not.
If you play it and while it's playing, you grab that cursor and then move it back and forth.
It doesn't. My computer doesn't want to do that with the because I'm actually playing the one you sent it to me in Facebook Messenger.
Yeah.
So it doesn't want to scrub. I'll see if I can capture it. Sorry.
Yeah, you might as soon as you hit play, hit pause.
Yeah, I see it. I just saw it. Ooh, okay. We need to go back a little further and. Oh, yep. I see that swing. There it is.
Yeah. And what's interesting is it's not a swing that's coming up at it. It's a swing
that's not
that's coming level across it.
I don't think
so. It's being swung from that height. It appears level.
Yeah, I agree that it's on that plane. That's not it. That's actually just light of refraction. No wait. Now it doesn't want to play anything. Okay, I don't know. That's oh, weird. Okay, why is
it's hard to see it as a stick. There's one frame when you catch it, it will be leading out in front of that camera, and you can clearly see it defined as a stick.
Yeah, there's some weird refraction happening in the lens, and then, but then that. Oh, okay, that's kind of odd.
Yeah, I think we had some moisture going on that night, and whatever it is set off the IR sensor. And so now we have moisture and IR interacting and glare, so it gets kind of fish-eyed.
Yeah.
It's like you can really see in the tunnel vision of it what it is, and you'll see that stick comes in so fast that it's kind of blurry, and then there's one point where if you froze on the one frame, you can see it's a stick. That's the only way we could tell it was a stick. But it wasn't something that came in a trajectory or left to right and hit the camera. It was something that swung into the camera from a pivot point.
Yeah, I agree. It looked, like something like that. I mean, I'm not saying it was a hand. I'm just saying,
We've got a lot of different videos that Doug has captured on these cameras that are interesting. I mean, we've got a no trespassing sign that's 10 feet in the air on a pretty good sized tree. And in the middle of the O on the out, where it's black, there is a camera lens embedded into the core of the tree with the sign over it, okay? Metal sign. It's about 2 foot by about 8 inches. Okay. And this camera was activated. We weren't sure what was doing it. And then you, from the back side of that sign, boom, 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 something hits it 3 times with a, I mean, hard enough that that whole sign's shaking as it's getting hit. And this thing's 10 feet in the air.
Really?
I mean, I don't know what it is. I can't say that it's Bigfoot, but boy, through the process of elimination, when you've got an active
Right.
research site, what do you draw that? What do you assign that to?
Right. No,
So-
I mean, I hear you, dude. I mean, I I was involved in a 20 to 30-minute wood knock encounter. In the middle of the night. I can't say it was Bigfoot because I never saw it, but pretty sure it was.
Mhm.
No, like, so I get that. Sometimes you just kind of have to process of elimination, man, and you know, we know that the Bigfoot phenomena exists in the woods. Like,
Yeah.
there's this thing we call Bigfoot. It's a colloquial word. I get that, but it's 8-foot tall monkey man, and
Yeah.
people see him all the time. So,
Well, the research site that I deal with, the thing is, I always go in there alone, right? I mean, I don't want to bring Doug with me and have it be after weeks and weeks. It's always been one guy leaving these things. Now 2 guys show up. They might never come back, right? I don't want to mess with what could happen if you have the wrong variable. And we've left things in that area like a boomerang. I've taken a boomerang and painted it fluorescent blue, and I left Velcro tabs on each end of it, top and bottom. And in the middle section of it, there was tape wrapped around it, sticky side up, clear tape. We've left that in the area. And what I do with things like that, when I go into an area, same with the ball, is I walk into that area, I take the ball and I throw it in the air and catch it, and I laugh at it. And I'll kick the ball, drop kick it as far as I can, and I'll run up to it and pick it up and laugh at it. And I'll throw it as far as I can and pick it up and laugh at it. And I do this for a half an hour.
right.
And then I set it down and move on to leaving a camera with no batteries in it. I'll leave a peanut butter jar, just different elements in this area, and I'll leave. And I think we spike their curiosity as they interact with these things. But the one time I brought a boomerang out there, I've never thrown a boomerang before, to be honest with you. Even as a kid, I didn't. So I wanted to display how it would work if they were watching me. And I chucked that boomerang as hard as it could, and it flew way out there and came back, just about freaking hit me right in the head. I don't know how the hell people catch those after they throw them, but I left it there. And that was the only item that I've ever left there that's been interacted with. I come back, they're moved, they're turned over, things like that. I'll strap a camera to a tree and it's pulled off the tree. I'll leave fluorescent blue flagging tape on a cedar bow and take a piece of Bitto honey candy and put it in a jar and put a lid on it. And I'll come back and the lid's on the jar and the candy's gone. You know, just we're trying to train that when you see fluorescent blue, there's something good there. It's a polished rock, it's a piece of candy, whatever.
Right.
See a blue game camera, don't be afraid of it. There's a feather there. There's something, you know, and these things always get taken, right? They're getting taken. There's only 4 times out of 31 visits, weekly visits, that stuff didn't get interacted with. But every time I go in there alone, I operate under the assumption that they're there and they're watching me. I don't know if they are. I don't know if they come in at 1 a.m. after I've left. I go in at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, leave the items, and I go back at mid-morning on a Friday and collect them. And one of the things that happened one time, this is about 7 weeks ago, well into this thing, is when I was paddling in, I had wood knocks happening on each side of the river, and it was still dark at the time. I was going in early that day. And as I heard these knocks, they were about 150, 250 feet in front of me on each side. And I'd paddle thinking, okay, I'm about to where those knocks were. And as I'd get there, I'd have knocks up in front of me again on each side of the river, back and forth knocks. Okay. So I'd paddle and catch up to about, I think this is about where those knocks were. They'd be up in front of me again. It's like they were just escorting me into that area. And that was the first time I was like, man, they're like here right now, right? I mean, it would kind of freak me out a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, dude. I mean, does it make you uneasy to be in that much of a
really,
remote area, knowing
it,
or thinking that that they are there and they are watching you.
well, you know, like I said, I've always operated for the first 20 some weeks. I operated under the idea that they come here after I leave, but are they here when I get here, right?
Yeah.
And one time when I was walking in through the corridor, I have to walk where I beach the kayak. I have to actually walk about a mile into where the meadow is, surrounded by woods, where we leave these things. And as I was walking in I left my kayak. I was about 100 yards from the kayak. I had a wood knock behind me, and and then I was here early that day. I mean, it was pretty dark. It when it just starts getting light out, we were just getting to that point. I mean, it was like 6:15 in the morning, and I try to not, when I hear a reaction like that, I've tried to condition myself where I don't stop and look around and try to figure out, can I see it, right? Because this whole research area, this specific one, was designed to leave items that they're curious about, let them play with it, collect DNA from these, and not try to call out to them. I don't wood knock to them. I don't howl. I don't do anything. And I don't film. I don't look around with cameras. I don't bring electronics in. I don't even have my cell phone, right? And so I'm walking with a backpack with items I'm going to leave. And when one wood knocks behind me, I froze me in my tracks like, holy shit, they're here right now. And I thought, just don't freak out. Just keep walking. And I kept walking. And there was a wood knock in front of me up where the meadow is. And that's when I realized that was the first time that I had realized they were here. And it was the first time I realized that for sure, that I had speculated I was. It was the first time I could verify I was dealing with more than one individual. That one of them was like signaling he's here with one single knock. And there was two knocks in front of me up there that basically were acknowledging, yeah, okay, we know. And I walked into that area and I played with that ball and left it and I hung that stuff up. I got to tell you, I mean, my butthole was like, you know, I mean, it was weird. I was pretty apprehensive. The idea that I'm 10 miles from the nearest road off grid, I got here by kayaking 8 miles and I don't have a cell phone on me. You know, if it wanted to throw a rock at me or something and it knocked me out, who's going to know? I mean, Doug knows where I'm at. There's a few people that I've
you might want to give out some GPS coordinates to people you trust there, bud.
So, anyways, that day when I got done leaving the stuff, I went back to my kayak to paddle out, and my kayak, I don't know if you're familiar with a kayak paddle. It has a plunger that when you push it down, you can separate it into two pieces, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, when I got back there, my kayak paddle I had shoved into the cockpit of the kayak, so half of it's hanging out up against the seat and the other half's underneath the nose, into the nose. When I got back, that paddle separated. One's laying in the kayak and the other one's leaning against it. Something had actually been able to push that plunger in and separate that paddle and left them there. And my life jacket I had on the back of the seat, and it was now laying on the rear tail, just draped across the kayak. And I had the buckles undone. There's 3 buckles that I had undone to take it off. The buckles are snapped on them. They're closed. And I can't explain this, Pat. This river is so freaking remote. Nobody's kayaking this thing. I mean, there may be on a Saturday afternoon, but there sure as shit wasn't at 7 in the morning on a Thursday. I could sit there all day long. Nobody will kayak past there. It is so far into the forest that to get to it with a kayak, I'm kayaking upriver 8 miles against the current to get there. And then it's a quick ride out. But, you know, was it Bigfoot that did that? I don't know, but I can't explain anything else that would have, you know? So from that point on, I'm pulling my kayak up on fairly hard, rocky area, and there's a little patch of fine sand, you know, like granite-y type sand, fine, dark sand on that river. That's where I pull my kayak up now. I want to see a footprint. If something walked up, I want to be able to say that's what it was, right?
Right. Yeah. Right.
It's just every time something happens, you always think, okay, what have I learned from this? What should I do different, right? So.
Oh, I know, dude. And, you know, this has been going on for 50 plus years now, bro. Like I always go back to the timeline of the PG film, you know, like that's sort of where my Bigfoot timeline starts, because I believe that's when it was first documented visually, for the first, you know, like for real. But dude, people keep learning and trying and learning and trying and learning and trying, and we never get anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's why I am encouraged by this, because it does seem to be, again, you know, just assuming everything's on the up and up here, and that there's no great, horrible misinterpretations going on, which,
Yeah.
you know, but I am curious, dude, was like, where the first time I ever thought about UV light was I think last time I had Doug on, and he brought it up. He started talking about it. And I was like, wow, you know what? I bet not a lot of people use UV light out in the woods, you know? So that got my wheels spinning. But so where did I mean, who came up with the idea to use UV light to look at hair differently?
Well, where this started is first of all, in the last, I'd say 10 years, people who archery hunt, where typically when you shoot a deer with an arrow, you got to do some tracking to find it. I mean, they don't just flop over right where you hit them. A lot of times they'll put on 150, 200 yards before they go down. And depending on the terrain and the area that you're in, they do make lights that will assist you to see blood easier, especially in the evening. If you look at the way detectives have used UV light for years,
Sure.
is they have a liquid called luminol that they'll spray on any bodily fluid, hit it with a UV light, and it glows. So, you know, the technology's been there for quite a while. What happened to me about 25 years ago, I had was using a little. We ice fish here in Minnesota, so I had a little. It's about the size of a quarter. You pinch it, and it has a little blacklight diode in it, LED diode, that you could charge your lure, your fluorescent painted ice fishing jig with. And after you shine it around it, it's kind of the same light you'd use to cure resin. You see, in resin kits, they give you one of these. But you shine it and charge that light up. And then when you drop it down your hole in the dark, you're looking down and you see that phosphorescent glow, like this jig's 15 feet into the water below you, and you can see it glowing.
Right.
And I started thinking, what could you use UV fluorescent reaction for in a recreational sense, right? So I came up with blacklight volleyball. And since then, it's kind of taken off different areas. I couldn't patent it because you're using existing technologies. The game of volleyball.
And it's a game of volleyball. Yeah.
We painted
Right.
the nets fluorescent chartreuse. We used fluorescent orange balls. The boundary markers was fluorescent gaffers tape, you know, and we'd surround it with 4 T40 blacklight bulbs in a case that we'd build these 6-foot tall cases with 48-inch T40 blacklight bulbs and a set of 4 of them. And we'd surround the court with 5 or 6 of those so that the whole court would glow up. And so in a dark gym, you'd play volleyball. It was like Star Wars, shit flying around. It was crazy. And we started perfecting that. And one time I was like, I don't want the ball to hit the lights and break the lights. So I dado edged the cabinet we were putting these black lights in and slid a piece of plexiglass into it. And I had it out in the shop with all the fluorescent stuff, and we light it up, and I'm thinking everything's going to light up like a Pink Floyd concert. Nothing happened. I mean, there's purple light in the garage, but nothing's glowing. And I thought, what the hell's going on here? I tipped it back, slid the plexiglass out, boom, everything just glowed. The plexiglass had a UV filter in it that was filtering out the black light from getting the fluorescence to react. And that's when I started really researching T40 fluorescent bulbs versus blacklight diodes. There's all these different Chinese manufacturers of blacklight diodes, 3 millimeter ones, 5 millimeter ones, different intensities. And we started realizing that light frequencies doesn't necessarily mean that the stronger the UV frequency is, the better it would glow. And I'll give you an idea of that. Those 4 T40 bulbs that were in that case, if I put different colored dots of fluorescent body paint on my hand. Orange, chartreuse, fluorescent green, fluorescent purple, fluorescent blue, fluorescent red. And I held them in front of that bright light. They glowed. But I had a small little 15-watt fluorescent tube over where we had our laptop playing music around this court. And under that dim light, I'd hold my hand, and it was way more vivid than those strong lights. And that made me realize that light frequencies, sometimes there's a sweet spot to get the right intense reaction. It's not, and we've noticed that now in looking at these hairs. If you take a multi-diode UV torch flashlight, that I mean it's brighter than shit, and you shine it on those things, on a hair, and you're filming it, you can see a little bit of pink. But if you just take a one diode little pinch resin cure light and hit it, it's brighter than hell. And it's not as intense as that torch light. So if you could imagine, if that torch light, if you were able to put it on a variable dial, meaning at 0 it wasn't on, right, and you could slowly crank the intensity up, somewhere in there, whether it's a 4 or a 5 or a 6, you'll reach the maximum reflection of that fluorescent color that you're seeing, that reaction or the reflection, and then you go past that and it gets more intense, but it kills the reaction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
So that makes it kind of hard in figuring out. That's one variable that we deal with. What kind of light, how bright the light, what's the light frequency, what's the intensity. So we have that, and then we also have the scientific approach of interpreting that this is what the camera's seeing under that light, right? But what one animal may see in a light spectrum and what the other animal sees, one could see it. It's almost like humans being colorblind. I see something as purple and you see it as gray. You know, I mean, and so when we say, well, this glows pink, it's glowing pink. Bigfoot, if they can see in a UV light spectrum and they can see that reaction or that reflection the same as we are here in these tests, they might not see it pink. It may be they see a reaction and it's a fluorescent glow. It may be a different hue.
Right.
It may look purple, may look blue. I don't know. You know, so we can't assume that because we're seeing something some way, that's how another species is going to see it. Even if they could see it in a UV light spectrum, they might interpret it slightly differently. So, you know, until you've got one and you can ask it questions, what does this look like to you? I mean, I don't.
Yeah, right.
There's a reaction or a reflection, and it could have something to do with how they perceive it.
That's an entire side of the question that will be very difficult to answer without an autopsy, honestly. Yeah. I'm just curious, you know, like, how did you guys like stumble on it? You and Doug, like, who?
I don't know how he stumbled on it. He called me at 1 a.m. and said, "Go grab a UV light and look at this." I think another scientist or another researcher had contacted him and said, "Get a UV light and look at one of these hairs and tell me if you see something. And if you don't, look at it on your camera." Somebody told him that. And at least that's what he's told me. And I don't know who that someone is. It could be someone that was researching something completely different. And just by mistake, it introduced a UV light spectrum while analyzing something, and it showed up to them. And they're like, "Whoa, wait a minute. I should ask Doug if he's ever seen this."
All right.
You know, I mean, who knows?
Well, I'm pretty sure it's this guy. Sorry. He's been.
Yeah, I don't know who it was that told Doug at first to look at this, but you know, once he did, it just kind of set us down that rabbit hole. Let's see
that's
how
cool.
many.
I just wanted to make I just sorry. So
whoever it was, I think, you know, you gotta understand, Doug gets really excited and passionate about stuff. And when he calls me, we don't waste any time. He says, "Go grab a hair, go grab this." He doesn't say it with, "Hey, I was talking to this guy," and you know, sometimes I don't get that backstory. I just get sent on a mission. Go do this and tell me what you see.
That's cool, man. I had to scratch that itch, bro. Like
Yeah.
I didn't want I didn't want phones to start blowing up. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, um I don't know about any of this either, dude. I'm just like you, dude. Like I haven't even talked to Doug about this because I wasn't able to reach out to him today. I sent him a text, but it was
Yeah.
too late. I knew he was already there, and
Yeah, he's up at the New Minnesota Bigfoot Conference. He's one of the guest speakers there, and
yeah,
he drove up there with. I think he picked up Cliff Barackman at the airport, and they drove up to Grand Rapids, Minnesota. I had talked to him once he got there at about 5 o'clock tonight, but I only had him for a few minutes. He was getting ready to go to this VIP speaker dinner. So,
well, I would like to see here's what I'd like to see is that we test this on human hair much more, like different kinds of human hair,
yeah.
Blondes, brunettes, redheads.
Yeah, he's
You
tested
know,
on all these different colors of human hair. He's
yeah,
tested on a lot of different colors. But here's the thing. Um, this is something that, whether or not it's something that, if you could find a human that has a reaction to this, the question would be: is this a trait that's a recessive trait that humans have evolved out of, or is this something that this person left their niche and evolved into? How did it end up working on this person? Is it genetic? Is it Irish people? Is it people from a certain area that pass it through their genes from that area? I mean, colors of hair don't really tell us a lot about the genetic makeup of who it came from. There is so much that you'd almost have to work into that science to really document why would it do it with this person and not that person.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it would just be interesting to do to see if it could be replicated. You know, um, but the fact that I mean, again, dude. I mean, at this point, we have there's some trust here, obviously, because we're going off the information that's being given to us that
Sure.
you guys are collecting these hairs out in these sort of weird places, let's just say, right? Like remote areas, or in Doug's case, a weird place, 8 foot up
Yeah, yeah.
a power pole.
Sometimes he's getting them from areas that are. I mean, he lives in Blaine, Minnesota. It's a suburb of Minneapolis. It's not that remote, but there is very heavily wooded areas right there to where there's sightings of Sasquatch in his area. That where that sighting occurred, if you walked 10 minutes, you'd be standing on the high school football field. I mean, it's just
Well, that's kind of scary.
crazy.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother discussion.
Oh yeah.
With that, I'll do one of these days. I'll do a show about, and it's like, how in the world or why in the hell do they get so close to us? They don't need to be this close to us, man. There's no
Yeah.
reason for it, man.
Yeah.
I know some people speculate that it's a game thing, because as game gets closer to us in areas that we don't hunt them, right? We
Yeah.
don't hunt them. Like I have deer all over Gainesville, all around this lake,
Yeah.
because we can't hunt them here. You
Yeah.
can't hunt them. You can't kill them here. And so, dude, you could almost walk up to them and pet them. So that whatever that factor is about game getting close to us, and they would be easier prey, I guess, for a Bigfoot.
Well,
But,
when you look at other people's speculations on this subject, what I don't believe it is that man's encroaching and taking away too much wilderness, so they have no choice. I don't
believe that either.
There's so much remote air that if
Yeah,
it
just-
doesn't want to
yeah.
live next to town, it can go move.
Yeah, it's called Google
There's
Earth.
nothing.
It's called
That
Google Earth.
doesn't-
Look at it. Yeah.
So I think it's going to be one of two things. Either one, like I say, I believe the species' weakest link is its own curiosity. So either curiosity drives it to those areas, and I don't believe they live in those areas or habitate in those areas. They just might end up there for a day or two because they're curious, and then they retreat back to where they can continue to be more elusive. Or it could be food related, or whatever. There's easy prey. And there's gardens in people's backyards, and it's hard to find berries now because they all dried up. So, I mean, who knows what would cause them to exist at times in the fringes of civilization, But when there's so much wilderness that if they wanted to remain elusive, they could. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, that's what I say. Like there's so many places for them to go and not really ever act with human beings. Not that often, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, why aren't they just there? Why do they have to be around us?
But also, Pat, to kind of just recap on what we've discussed so far tonight. I mean, all that me and Doug can do is, and other researchers that we work with, Doug works with quite a few of them. All that we can do is share with people, this is how we collect the hairs. We still can't guarantee it's Bigfoot, but we've certainly taken lengths and measures to try to ensure that if we're going to work with hairs like that, that's what we try to just not find hairs and say, oh, it must be Bigfoot, right? We're using techniques to collect them that we try to put some degree of vetting into what we get. Once we've gotten them, there's another vetting process prior to DNA testing. Okay, so, and this is going to be revealed in Legend Meets Science 2 to a very detailed degree. But when we look at a hair sample, we see a 5-scale structure around the shaft of the hair on hairs that we assume to be Bigfoot hairs that we've collected right. When we look at human hairs, there's a 6 or 7 scale structure around a human hair. It's either 6 or 7, never 5. Okay, so before we spend 10 grand on do DNA analysis, nuclear DNA analysis, all that stuff, on a hair that we think is a Bigfoot hair, we look at it and say, does it have a 5-scale structure? That's our first vetting process. If it does, we're saying, whoa, we know it's not human. Okay, and we can tell through basic DNA comparison when we do it if it's not bear or anything else, right? So that's a hair that we would say we have to test it. If we look at that hair and there's not a 5-scale or structure around the shaft of the hair, we aren't going to put 10 grand in testing that hair.
Gotcha.
Because we really feel strongly, and a lot of scientists feel strongly, that if some of these hairs, the ones that have been tested, that end up being unknown primate, and then the scientific community just quits looking any further. They don't base map it. They don't catalog it. They just stop, right? Those hairs, what they have in common is a 5-scale structure around the shaft of the hair, the diameter. So that's what leads us to say, okay, unknown primate hairs, the majority of them that have been tested are unknown primate, have a 5-scale structure. We're going to use that as a first step of vetting process to say, okay, let's take that to the next level. And I'll give you a little, without saying exactly where it is. There's a large East Coast university that has a large team of scientists that will be doing DNA testing on these hairs and sebum samples for Legend Meets Science 2. And what we're going to do is we're not using one lab. We have a second lab and a third lab that are going to retest with different scientists in a different lab setting so that we have, it's triplicated the control of these results. We can't just say, well, that lab made a mistake. Well, then all 3 labs had to have made that mistake. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there is a lot that goes into this. And that's why Doug talks about the cost and raising money for the document.
And that's going to get expensive. And that's why Doug he's openly talking about that. Yeah. He's wanting to fund it because he doesn't want to go to a network.
No.
Because he doesn't want to give network execs control where they'll just go straight to the entertainment side of it,
We can't let anybody have any control of this outside. Because what we're experiencing right now is scientists, 5 years ago, I would 100% agree with the fact that scientists don't want to get involved with this because of their reputation and their peers and this and that. They don't want to be the freak. They don't want to subscribe to theories that are going down rabbit holes. So it was hard to get scientists to come on board.
Yeah, it's taboo.
Now there's one thing that's happened recently with the whole UFO, being, disclosed to the public of certain elements of that. I don't
Now
want to
we're
go
talking.
into that whole subject, but scientists are
I
realizing
will.
that within 18 to 24 months, it's likely we're going to have a body. This thing's going to, or we're going to baseline DNA. We're going to figure out a way to do it. And they're trying to hedge their bets. A lot of scientists don't want there to be, undeniable proof here all of a sudden, and they're stuck on the wrong side of the fence as the deniers. Now all of a
Now
sudden,
who's predicting that within a couple of years we'll have a body? Wait, who's
well,
making
I
that
don't know that we'd
prediction?
have a body. I'm just saying within a couple of years, I think we'll have proof. I think it comes through DNA. I've always said that. And Doug is the first one that will back this up, is that DNA technology right now is 10 times what it was last year.
Right, it's
And next year
exponential.
it will be 10. That's how fast it's advancing, right? And knowing that, I think a lot of scientists say, I'm not going to sit here and wait till it's proven and still be the denier. So now you've got a lot of scientists to come forward saying, look, when you take into consideration, if you've got a 5-scale structure hair and it's an unknown primate, let's base map. Let's baseline this. If we had 8 hair samples from 8 different individuals, right now you could do the whole, you'd break it wide open. If you had scientists and labs that would take it to that degree. So when we get all these samples, what we want to be careful not to do is get them all from Minnesota, right? I mean, because what happens here versus what happens, I'll give you an example. And I don't want to mention his name, but there's a great researcher down in Florida and I think you've had him on the show before. And I've seen hair samples that he's had. He's sent me pictures of them. They don't look like my hair samples that I collect. They don't look like the ones Doug's collected. They don't look like ones from Washington. They're shorter, they're thicker, they're blacker, okay? But now you have to take into account encounters with species in Florida, a member of that species in Florida versus one in Alberta or British Columbia, 2 completely different geographic locations, different environments. Would one have longer wispier hair with more follicles per square inch to create a more insulating layer than one in Florida that has coarser hair, less follicles per square inch? The hair is shorter. You know what I'm saying? I mean, these could be the exact same species, same genetic makeup, but yet they've adapted to the environment they live in. And a good analogy to that is where you live. I used to live in Georgia. You shoot a deer down there, a full-grown 6-year-old, 7-year-old buck will have some pretty decent horns, but its body's the size of a German Shepherd. You shoot a 6 or 7-year-old buck up in North Dakota or northern Minnesota, that buck's pushing 280 pounds. I mean, it's the same exact DNA in these 2 animals. Exactly. One's got 30-40% more body mass because it's adapted to what they're eating and corn fed versus, so I can't say, well, I look at that hair and it doesn't look like Bigfoot hair. It could be Bigfoot hair. It just looks different than the hair we have in this environment where it gets 40 below zero and all that. So,
Right.
it's just, when I talk about these hairs, they look translucent. It may not be like that on a Bigfoot in Texas. It could be darker. It could be thicker. I don't know.
Sure.
All me and Doug can do is share our experiences, what we're seeing, not declaring anything as fact. And when we stumble upon something through, even if it was somebody in chat who brought this to Doug's attention, and said, hey, look at this. There's something going on here. And then Doug's got all kinds of researchers he could call. The reason why he called me is I had a UV light background. And he says, dude, you've got hair samples. I'm really confident that the way you're collecting your hair samples, that it'd be worth testing those because I feel like they're likely Bigfoot hair samples, right? Mm-hmm. I can't just call somebody who said they found a clump of hairs. It could be horsetail hairs and say, oh, do this test on yours. Because if we don't feel fairly confident in how they were collected, I can't feel at all confident in whatever the results of the test you're going to run. So all we do is just share what we're seeing and what we're experiencing. We rarely will declare anything that we feel that we've observed as fact ever, because we aren't there yet. And
I
I don't think
agree.
anybody's there yet.
I agree, and hopefully this isn't too premature, but we'll see. I mean, to me, it's promising. It is. There's something interesting going on here that
Yeah.
that is possible movement. I've not seen before. Now, Leon asks. He says, "Have you checked to see if other large primates have the same layered structure as human hair, or is it different?"
Meaning the scale structure around the shaft.
I think that's what he's talking about.
Yeah. There is a couple different research documents out there that scientists have put together that compare different primates, chimpanzees, great apes, things like that, orangutans, different types of spider monkey versus all these different types of primates, and they've documented this is pretty well. I mean, you can Google this and find this stuff about the structures of the hair and even the genomes when they run them, where the comparable areas are and where the differences are. It's pretty well documented. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to speak to these are the ones that do and these are the ones that don't. But I feel that from what I've heard from Doug and what I've read in the research is that 5-cell structures are pretty common amongst primates. Now, that's not all I know for sure is that it's not just uncommon in humans. I don't think it's possible in humans. Almost all human hair, from what I've read, is a 6 or 7 cell diameter cell structure or scale pattern around the diameter. And that's, take it for what it's worth. I'm not a scientist, but all I can go on is what other scientists have published,
And is that or is it not a human trait then?
What, for the 6 or 7 structure versus 5? I don't
Oh wait,
know that.
what is it for humans? I'm not sure.
6 or 7. It's either 6 or 7
Okay.
around the diameter. I have never heard of any human hair being tested where it was a 5 scale structure around the diameter of the shaft.
Okay.
So, and that's why I say
Okay.
it's a vetting thing. When we vet a hair before we do DNA on it, if we were to look and see does it have a 5 scale pattern around the diameter, all we're doing is saying let's make sure it's not human hair.
Right. Yeah.
We're not saying anything other than that.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And of course, you could look at the ends of the hair too, see if it's ever been cut. Basically,
Yeah.
like it's always.
But the most commonality of every hair that's brought to us has been handled by humans. So the most common contamination would be that did we end up with a human hair or not?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one, dude. I always say like the DNA has to be done like properly, and I know Doug gets that. That's why, again, back to that, it to do proper DNA, people costs a lot of money. You don't just like show up at your local DNA lab and go, here, look for unknown primate, like
Yeah.
they're
Well,
gonna
the
be like,
university-
okay, 50 grand,
Yeah.
we'll do it,
Well, the university that he's partnering with LMS2 has basically just said, we'll test any sample you bring to us. Now, that's not to say they'll do it for free, but versus going to an independent lab and saying, here's 212 samples, get your calculator out. I mean, I think that we vetted the capability of the lab, the reputation of the lab, how driven they are and committed they are to the process. They realize that LMS2 is going to be a holy grail breakthrough in what it brings to this community and this mystery. Because of the depth and the length, they're committed Doug and his associates are committed, Justin, to go through and vet these things and test them to every technological degree they can. And I'll be as honest as I can be. It's not my wheelhouse. It really isn't. I don't know. A lot of the things when it comes down to the science of something, I don't know shit about it. I'm not a scientist. I don't have a degree in it.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I mean, I know that Doug, at the end of the day, man, he wants to present Legend Meets Science 2 is a pretty, like, a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
Like, almost definitive, if not like as close as you could get to definitive, right?
Yeah.
So no false narratives, no hey, it's just a bunch of spooky stories, like none of that stuff, man. Like he really wants to do a game-changing thing. And that makes sense, dude, given like the things he's done in the past, it's I mean, hell, man, the giant squid monster quest, it's like, that was good stuff.
Well, it was a breakthrough for him. Prior to that, you can't really properly research anything without the right funding. And the problem with science in the last 50 years is that it isn't what science used to be 100 years ago. 100 years ago, scientists followed wherever their intrigue brought them.
Yeah.
And now scientists follow the money. They'll research whatever the funding is telling them to research, and the funding is directed by governments and corporations. It's not funded by intrigue anymore. And we've reached that point to where when you have a phenomenon like this that's occurred for so long, that there comes a point where scientists are going to say, we're either going to put a bullet in it and kill it, or we're going to prove it. I mean, this doesn't need to linger on anymore.
Yeah, and the problem with scientists ever saying, we're just going to go put a bullet in it and kill it, it's like, well, no, first you need to listen to everything we've been saying for the past 50 years before you try and do that, dumbass, because that's not going to work out for you either way. It's
when I designed this research technique of collecting DNA samples without technology, without any interference, without trying to communicate with them, without trying to just leaving stuff and provoking their curiosity. And for 40 weeks, the goal was going to be to try to collect as much as you could with no technology, so that you could condition their comfortability in this specific area, their interactions with the items that you leave, to where it would culminate in a very high-tech event, and try to capture the video. And there would be batteries in the cameras, and we will have high-speed cameras and audio recording, everything that's available technology-wise, that would be there in one day. When I go in, I don't leave the same items. Everything's rigged now. Okay. And it isn't because, we are just going out trying to get a picture of it. It's that we've already at that point collected the DNA that we need for LMS2, right?
Yep.
And other researchers are still collecting that DNA. But what happens is you create this conditioned atmosphere to where instead of a blue ball sitting out there, it's now a foam core that's 15 inches round and 1.25 inch holes embedded in it, with lipstick IR 4K cameras, with wiring that has an embedded lithium battery pack, and then it's all plastic coated in blue so that it looks just like the ball with Velcro tabs, right? And you go out there and you play with it and you set it down, and then you have your blue game cameras that have never been powered, but you have lipstick cameras sitting off to the side filming the blue camera with the treat in front of it. All these things where we're just trying to catch it with its ass out all of a sudden, right? And it may be that
trying to trick
it starts walking into that meadow like it normally does after the blue ball, and 40 yards away it stops and says, I sense something weird here. I don't know if it can sense IR. I don't know if it can sense a battery presence. Who knows, right? But if it did and it stopped and said, whoa, something's different here, too late. You're already on camera. So what we're doing is trying to take this non-threatening environment that they've benefited from and they've enjoyed for 5 months and turn it into the ultimate betrayal, right?
Mhm.
You'll get one shot at it. If it don't work, they'll probably never come back. But we're going to take an area that they've been coming over and over and over, and they love coming there and they're comfortable coming there, and boom, we're going to try to get the technology in there in one shot, one 24-hour window. It may work, it may not. But what would be beneficial about it is you brought up the Patterson Gimlin film. The intriguing thing about the Patterson Gimlin film is that most of the time as researchers, what we're chasing down is photo or video, audio recordings, DNA, or a casting. Okay, there's 4 things that we're trying to achieve usually in research.
Mhm.
Photo and video, audio recording, DNA, or a casting. That seems to be what every researcher is trying to capture, right? If we go out in the woods at 3 in the morning and bang on a tree and we get a knockback, or we howl and something howls back, that's a great experience, but it didn't advance the science. So we're trying to capture one of these 4 things. Now, what happened with Patterson Gimlin film is they captured more than one. They had video, they had castings, and had they realized the value of DNA back then, they could have got DNA off that site. They seen exactly where it walked, exactly every branch it touched. They could have got DNA off that site had they understood the value of it back then. So we're collecting DNA from this one site. That's great. We can tell people, hey, we got all these hairs there. But what if we could just get a good 4K color video off the same site? Now you've got 2 of the 4 elements, which rarely happens anymore. I mean, there's just like the Freeman footage and things like, there's a couple instances where you had video and castings or whatever. But if you could get DNA and video both off the same location, that is something that's pretty profound.
Yeah, that's huge. That would be huge.
And so that was the goal, is let's create an environment rather than all these videos are taken. Nobody who's very rarely is somebody taking a video and 20 seconds before they push record, did they expect to see anything? They didn't. They're operating under duress. They're not focused. It's a blob squat. You know, I mean, these are probably real specimens that they just can't, they're not prepared to get the right footage, right? Let's create an environment where we expect them to be, and let's have it prepared to where we're ready to capture it. And let's get them to where they completely don't expect it, because for 40 weeks they've been coming there and nothing's ever happened. It's always been safe. Nobody's called to them. Nobody's wood knocked at them. Nobody's chased them. They just leave shit that they love to pick up, right? Maybe that you create the perfect storm that they'll walk into and boop, they're on video. Who knows? It might not work. It might.
Yeah, it's maybe.
It's just a different approach to, you know, Doug puts all these live cams up and they're running 24 hours, right? Maybe he'll get something, maybe he won't. But this is kind of that same thing, is let's take a different approach and not use any technology, and then all of a sudden, boom, throw technology in and see if it made a difference. It's just something that, from what I understood, I've never heard of anybody doing that before.
That's the thing about the Bigfoot world, dude, is that it's full of clever people. And I know other people in the Bigfoot world who are extremely clever, you know, in how they use their technology or their tactics. You know, you hear all kinds of like really interesting, oh wow, that could work kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and you're kind of talking about that too, you know, like as far as the visual aspect, you know, getting those optics, right? And it for me, it always comes back down to trying to trick them, like try and trick them, and it's hard to. It seems like it's really hard to do, just because people have been trying to trick them for decades.
Yeah, and to some degree, the techniques that we use are just simply really underestimating not just their ability, but their determination. I mean, they've existed for hundreds of years, 24/7, out in the woods, elusive. They feed themselves. They don't. You look at how good they've gotten at something. We're human beings, and even the most experienced ones in the outdoors spend maybe a month, a year in the outdoors, and they still sleep inside at night. A lot of times, they still go to the restaurant and grab something to eat at the end of the day. If you had to live out there 24/7, 365 days a year, year after year, whether it's 40 below or 125 degrees outside, and you had to survive and you had to feed yourself, and your goal was to never be detected and be as elusive as you can and be as quiet as you can. People say, I cannot believe that I seen it move from point A to point B and I never heard anything. There was no leaves crunching. You're completely underestimating its ability to do that, because that's all it does. It's really good at being elusive.
Oh yeah, I mean,
We can't even
there's no
grasp
doubt about
the
that.
scale, really.
No, there's that's a given. That's one of those things that I just throw into the category. Well, it is what it is, dude. I don't care who I'm talking to, a
Yeah.
Bigfooter or a hardcore skeptic. I'm like, that's what it is, because that's what it would have to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
And
they'd
that-
be in a zoo. They'd be in a zoo.
And that's you skeptics who maybe haven't had an experience or aren't connected to it, to where they are pretty determined in their skepticism. They'll ask questions like, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? The answer would be, if you were capable of doing that and you did it 24 hours a day, your whole entire life, don't you think you'd be good at it, that a human couldn't find you if you didn't want to be found, or they couldn't hear you move from there to there? Or, I mean, it's sometimes common sense has to play in to understand that there is no definitive answer to the question, other than that it's capable of shit that you don't have the ability to fathom how good it could be at that, because of the necessity for them to survive. They have to be that good.
I disagree, Jorge, and we do have a skeptic here, man. Jorge, humans are always found. No, they're not. Not always.
No, they're still looking for one in a swamp in Florida that they're pretty, a lot of resources trying to find this one dude. He's not even an outdoor survivalist, and it's been weeks and they still don't know where he's at.
Right, and he could have disappeared into civilization, actually. But there are plenty of human beings on this planet that were never found, one way or another.
Well, I mean, you look at the missing 411, the hunted, these clusters of missing human beings that are all over the country. Nobody found them, dude. That's why they're still a dot on that map. Nobody found these people.
Yeah. Some of those people were never found. So I mean, that gets into a different discussion and a bit of a semantic old discussion, I will admit. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with you, Jorge. Like, yeah, we've only been looking for that dude for a week or two. We may find Dog the Bounty Hunter. Seems like he might be the guy. And also, Jorge does bring a good point. Like, Bigfoot isn't one person; it's a species.
No, sure.
So that's a good point. We're looking for a species here, not just one individual.
Yep.
Yep.
No, I totally agree.
He's sharp. He's a sharp guy. He might be a lawyer. I don't know.
Well, and I don't, for everything I would love to have a conversation with Jorge, because one, I think that I'm capable of doing it with him in a respectful nature. This isn't personal. I would appreciate hearing his opinions, right?
Yeah,
but
when it comes skeptic. Down, he's a true skeptic. Yeah.
When it comes down to it, for every question that Jorge is going to ask about, well, how come this? How come that? I'm going to return a question of, how do you explain this? How do you explain that? And I will outnumber his questions 3-1 with stuff you can't explain that lead to believing this is not a mystery, or this is a valid mystery that could be something evident, versus the why can't you explain this thing? History's been full of why can't you explain this, and somebody explains it eventually.
Yeah, I could make that happen. We could turn this ship in that direction, Or we could do it on another night. I don't know. What do you think, Jorge? Could we do it on another night? I mean, I'll do it now. Sorry, there's a little bit of a lag between live and chat. God dang.
Well, and Jorge's perception and the points that he would make as a skeptic, it'd be nice if we had a couple skeptics like Jorge, who it's not just coming one-dimensionally from one person's questions, but maybe a couple people, and then you had a couple people who I would hate to be one of the ones arguing the pro case for Bigfoot, simply because I don't have the scientific background to say, well, science shows us this, science shows us that. All I'm doing is sharing my experiences. And, I do that carrying no burden of bringing you to believe. I don't. That's your journey. I can share my experience. I can share my encounter. I can share my research. Your journey to be a believer or not be a believer isn't my burden to bear. I'll share what I've experienced. And if you believe, if it helps you believe, great. If it doesn't, I'm not going to feel bad about it. You are going to either get there or not get there. And it's not going to have a whole lot to do with me forcing you one way or the other.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, you're right. You can't just say it, to me the word belief. I try and leave that out of any kind of speaking about it.
Yeah.
Just because it implies faith. But people casually use the word believe in replacement of knowledge.
Yeah.
So that's fair, but
well, and then also let's just, if you were to use the word believe, let's put 100 people who believe Bigfoot's real into a room and then ask them, what do you believe it is? And you start getting 100 variations of what they believe in.
Oh yeah.
I agree. Is it an extraterrestrial that can fart out orbs, or is it a living human being? I mean, what do you believe in? I mean, you might believe in something, but what are you believing in, right? That's where it gets variable.
Yeah, and that's where people's, again, like I say this all the time, probably to nauseum, is that the lack of knowledge enables an individual to fill that lack of knowledge, fill that void with whatever they like, whatever their worldview is, whatever their personality is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like a million variables where people will fill that void of knowledge.
It's rarely scientific. It's more environmental. What were you brought up to believe? What does your life experiences push you towards subscribing to?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Sometimes that's a hard road to walk down, bro. Like I love engaging with the skeptics, but it's a tightrope because you can't, like you were saying before, like you can't be like hardcore matter of fact about things, but there's some things that you feel like you should be a matter of fact about, and I only pick a couple of them to be like, you don't understand, this is an actual fact, blah 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 blah.
But also you have to acknowledge before you even start the debate that at this point in this mystery, there will not be a winner. Nobody's going to win this argument at this point. Okay, so
whoever wins the debate. I've never seen anybody win a debate.
That's what I'm saying. There won't be a winner or a loser. It's either going to end with one of two things: hurt feelings or the ability to agree to disagree, and that's it. That's the only results you're going to get from it. You might bring out some intellectual thinking. I might hear from a skeptic, boy, I never realized that you would perceive it in that light before. Makes me think about something. But in the end, the results, the skeptic isn't going to become a believer, and the believer isn't going to say, I'm going to stop believing. I mean, you're going to agree to disagree, or somebody's going to get butthurt about it and quit.
Right.
And that's what happens.
And
nobody wins.
Yeah. The butthurt thing, man, is that's called a shit show. I don't know.
And they can be entertaining too, but I don't think that's the kind of show you're trying to run.
Well, no. I mean, well, no. You're right. I do not like shit shows. I'll shut a shit show down.
There's a lot of people enjoy watching a train wreck. They'll show up to watch it. But if we're trying to advance the science, if we're trying to advance the science or have a discussion that logically debates it, that's not a shit show. When it turns into a shit show, that's when more people start popping on to watch, because some people are only here for that. That's all they want to see.
Yeah, no, and trust me, I get that, dude. I spent most of my career in the entertainment industry, so I know how any and all variables and aspects of that shit works. But I don't know. I mean, would you be willing to engage with Jorge for, let's say, I'm gonna have to put like maybe a half an hour time limit on it
tonight, or
tonight.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll listen. Whatever I say to Jorge is based on something that I've experienced, right? Or what I've. I mean, I can't. If they say, well, why haven't scientists done that? I'm not those scientists. Some of the stuff I'm not going to try to represent something I don't know. But when it comes to what my experience have been, look, I've stood 15 feet in front of one and had it throw a log at me. There's nothing you're ever going to say that makes me believe that they don't exist. It just isn't going to happen. But
yeah, and I don't want to contaminate the discussion too much, but people seem interested. I didn't mean to turn this into a debate tonight, but I've been wanting to do debates on my channel, so I might happen. Oh man,
my personality when it comes to a debate versus, let's say, what I think of other people in our community, the Patrick Vaughns and stuff, the way that they would I look at what Patrick's experience as a researcher, for how long he's been doing it, let's say, his base to draw from to say, well, that's not what I've experienced, or I've seen differently in that. He's got a lot more background than what I had as far as what I've discovered in research so far. You know what I mean? There's people out there that would be great at this. I don't know that I'm the best one, but certainly I appreciate debates. And I love hearing skeptics tell me why they're skeptics. It helps me understand.
No, yeah, me too.
It's either going to fortify my belief stronger, or it's going to, at the worst, it's going to help me realize that when I'm talking to people about it, whether it's at a live forum or whether it's on a show, that there are some people out there who believe this, and I wouldn't realize they believe that if I don't hear Jorge share what, you know what I mean?
Okay. All right. Well, all right. We'll get him in here. I'm just gonna slap a 30-minute. I'm gonna slap a 30-minute. Like, we can go longer. But yeah, like, I don't want this to turn into a. Oh wait, where is it? Hold on. Sorry. I don't have Tim here tonight. He's on vacation, like wakeboarding or something somewhere. Oh, there he is. All right. So yeah, I'll bring Jorge in. That's what I call him. All right, here you go, bud. All right, bud. Sending it. Sending it. There you go. Bam. All right. So yeah, we can have this discussion. I'll moderate fairly. I won't interject. So it's not a 2v1. Just so you know, Jorge, it's not a 2v1. I'll moderate. All right. Here we go. We'll see what happens. Hopefully it won't turn into a shit show.
Well, and I'll say this. I don't even know Jorge, okay, but I will tell you this.
He's a cool guy. He's been on my show before.
Yeah.
So
I'll say this. Whether or not he's a skeptic or not certainly doesn't affect my respect for another person and their opinion. Okay.
okay.
I can handle if we don't have the same, if we don't agree on something, right? So this debate would simply be me sharing my beliefs and him sharing his beliefs. And
All right.
I'm
Just
not
good
going to feel
discussion.
some burden to try to nudge him off of where he stands. I mean,
Here he is. And please welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, our favorite skeptic, besides Benjamin Radford, Jorge 343.
Yay! Woo! Yay!
hey, Jorge, how are you?
Howdy.
Where are you located?
The Midwest of America.
Okay, well, that's kind of where I am. I'm northern Midwest, but yeah.
Hey, so quick brief about me, Jeff. We haven't interacted before. Biology and living things is not my forte.
Yeah.
I actually have a couple of degrees in geology, so
Sure,
I like the rocks more so. But I am familiar with the sciences. I've done research and all that jazz before.
Sure.
At university. So while I am not opposed to the idea of Bigfoot, as Pat will attest, I also don't have a problem with it. I think that'd be awesome. But I think that the standard of evidence presented by the Bigfoot community is less than what is acceptable. I think there's a lot of want to believe more so than reason to believe. And again, I've talked with Pat a few times. I think he would agree that that's what I believe. But if I saw a Bigfoot tomorrow, I won't be like, nah, that didn't happen. I'd be like, cool. Oh,
yeah,
sweet Lord, that's a gigantic thing right there.
Yeah.
So that's my quick 411. So you have it before we converse.
Yeah. Well, and I can tell you, Jorge, as somebody that I'm 53 years old, and I had an encounter when I was 18, and it's fairly well documented encounter. I was with two other people when it happened. I was on a small island in Manitoba, and we stopped on this island because one of my friends had to take a leak while we were fishing, and I had walked up a game trail and ended up standing directly in front of it. And
yes,
I had it throw a log at me, it knocked me down the trail. It stepped out in front of me and my two friends. I had witnesses there. I can tell you, had I never had that encounter, Jorge, I may be exactly where you're at right now.
Yep.
I might never have gotten into research, trying to see the things and discover the things that I've trying to discover and draw analogies on. Without that one period in my life of life experience, I may easily be standing there saying, I don't know how you can say it's real.
I have never experienced anything like that, which is, again, why I say what I say. But I would argue there are many people who would say they've experienced things in their lives,
yeah,
and that they believe that you would not believe their experiences.
Oh, absolutely.
So
when I listen to Squatch,
what I meant by that is you saying that to me is not good evidence to me.
Certainly, it shouldn't be. It's, especially when you don't know me, right?
Yes.
I mean, I've got friends that I'm hunting guides with that understand that we guide together, and they understand that my moral fortitude and things that they judge my character by, and they don't doubt me. Somebody who doesn't know me, they don't have any of that. I'm just another guy, right?
Yeah.
And to be forthright with you, I mean, when you look at what people hear for encounters, I mean, I'll tell you, I'm not judging Wes and Sasquatch Chronicles based on every guest he's ever had, right? I believe Wes is a great guy. I think but when I hear 800 or 900 or however many encounters they have there, I'll tell you straight out, I think half of them are bullshit. I don't think they're real. I think a lot of them are real, but I think there's a lot of them that aren't real. And I don't know how much that does for this community of people who believe that Bigfoot's real when they hear accounts that don't make any sense at all versus accounts that they feel I believe that. I can tell in the tone of voice. I can tell in the person's background. Why would they risk their reputation sharing it, things like that. There are people that simply by life experience are more believable by default than other people. There's no way you can argue that.
I would not oppose that statement in a broad sense, but to me, there's a difference between believable story and you've proven it to be true.
Sure.
Like everyone knows a fox exists. Like I may never have seen a fox. I've seen foxes, but for sake of conversation, guinea pig, prairie dogs. There we go. I've never seen a prairie dog in real life, but I have no reason to doubt that prairie dogs exist. Right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of evidence I'm looking for with
Sure.
Bigfoot. Is the kind
Sure.
of evidence I expect for any other animal I've never actually seen in real life.
Sure. And a true skeptic should stand on that ground.
Yeah.
Your skepticism should be based on the lack of science, not because I don't think these people are telling the truth or not. It's show me the evidence, right? That's where your skepticism lies. Nobody likes to hear somebody and say, do I think they're lying or do I think they're telling the truth? Let's throw all the encounters out. Let's throw all of the stories out, all the hearsay, even when I say this is what I've experienced when I research, well, you weren't there with me, right? So let's throw that out. Let's throw all that stuff out and just look at the science. That's really the only thing you could debate with a skeptic who stands from your position. Nothing else would matter. We're talking DNA evidence, real photo evidence, video evidence, a body, a pile of shit.
If you brought me a body or a pile of shit, I think that'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
I've yet to see neither turd nor person, but I'd love to. That'd be cool. I'd touch it. I would touch the turds.
I'm just saying from a skeptic who looks at it from the lack of science point of view, rather than I don't know if I believe these people point of view. If we're simply looking at the science, we can't debate what most of the community is used to draw what they believe in, because they haven't collected a hair themselves and ran DNA evidence on it to a nuclear level. They haven't found a pile of shit. They haven't had one throw a log at them on a little island on a lake. That they're drawing their perception of this mystery and their belief standpoint of the mystery based on a lot more than just the scientific evidence. So if we're going to argue or have a debate between me and you, and your debate's going to come from the stance of scientific evidence, we're going to discount everything else and just look at evidence. You're right. You're going to say there's a lack of it. There's not enough of it, right? I totally understand that. That's why I involved in research. That's why a lot of my friends who are serious researchers are involved in the degree they are, because they're trying to bring forth the stuff that the Jorges of the world would say, holy shit, you got something there, right?
That'd be cool.
Because I can't sit here and debate with you and say, how can you explain 10,000 people having an encounter? And we're talking about people from law enforcement backgrounds. We're talking about scientists. We're talking about Forest Service workers, first class encounters. How do you explain them all? We don't get to debate about that because it's not scientific proof to you.
Yeah. And all right, so I'm a few beers in, so I'm trying to collect my thoughts as I'm going here. Sorry. But the reason why I would say that statement is accurate is what I said a little while ago, which is I can list off things with the exact same level of credential that you disagree with.
Yeah.
So we would both agree that that level of argument fails at some point. So why would it work for you and not work for others? Like there are people that believe in religions you don't believe in with the exact same level of story, right?
Sure.
Or people believe in cryptids you don't believe in with the exact same level of story, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say we're in agreement at this point. Yes.
You know, my when I look at the paranormal as a whole, right? There's a lot of things that I don't have any life experience with, and so when people talk about UFOs, you know, I've never been abducted by one. I've never seen one land in front of me. I've never felt like I had an out-of-body experience. When it comes to ghosts, I've never had one grab my arm in the darkness when I knew I was alone in a room. I've never had that happen to me before. So when I hear other people's accounts of it happening, I have to start looking at, well, who is this person? What's their background? What's their credibility? What's their believability? Because a story is a story until you're not analyzing the story, you're analyzing who's telling it, right? I mean,
Sure.
that's really what it comes down to. And so when we look at 10,000 encounters with Bigfoot that are documented, and we say, is there anything to it? And we don't look at who it is, what their background was, what would their motive for telling the truth or not telling the truth be, and we don't analyze any of that. I don't think we have a whole debate on what's going on here with this mystery, because we're only going to debate the science, and the science is developing every day. Like we said earlier, DNA technology is 10 times what it was last year, and next year it's going to be 10 times more. So, I mean, with the science moving the way it is, if we have the scientific debate, let's say 6 months or 12 months from now, it may be a slam dunk for me, or it may not be. It may be a slam dunk for you because the DNA showed something completely different than what I thought it was going to show. You know, I mean, it's a scientific debate on does it exist or not based on factual first-hand evidence is one that I think you could bring forth elements to, and I could bring forth elements to, and it would be a great debate. But when we don't try to explain the phenomena of cave drawings of these things, of, you know, stories handed down generation to generation. I mean, somebody came up with this thing, this idea of this thousands of years ago and drew it on a cave wall. The documentation throughout history that's been shared in the lore, in the stories, in the knowledge, in the languages. And then we start looking at current ones since, like, let's
Jeff.
say in the last 50 years, people documenting their encounters.
Yes,
and
Jeff,
people
I'd like to ask a
investigating.
question on something you just said. So I know I'm sorry to interrupt, but if
No.
if I don't say it, I forget it. It's gone,
Sure.
right?
No, I
So
appreciate that.
you say the documentation. Are two parts? One, is Bigfoot to you a somewhat local phenomenon, or is it like everywhere? And two, how far extending do these stories? I'm assuming you're talking about like non-modern stories with what you were just saying. How far do these stories have to extend with us still talking about the same base group or society or whatever Bigfoot happens to have? Like, is someone talking about, is a Native American story in Minnesota the same story as a Native American story in northern Mexico or in Europe, etc.?
Yeah. So first of all, when I used the phrase documentation, I'm talking about everything from a sketch on a cave wall from 10,000 years ago, and everything to somebody contacting law enforcement last week saying something crossed the road in front of me, and this is what it looked like, or this was in my backyard, or this thing killed my dog and I watched it do it. Well, do you have it on video? No. But it was documented. That report was documented. The BFRO, you can hate Matt Moneymaker all you want, but there's an awful lot of good researchers that were involved in that organization that took 3,000 encounters and investigated them, interviewed people, figured and just shared as much factual evidence as they could. And so those are documentations, police reports, whether it's documentations of Native American tribes transcribing experiences, whether it's Teddy Roosevelt writing a biography saying, I saw this, I'm just talking about documentation in the broad sense that there's been all these stories throughout time that I'll tell you what, Jorge, if one guy somewhere started a bullshit rumor, how the hell did it get to where it's at now?
Okay.
All across the world.
On that note, my second question was, are all of these stories about the same, I believe Pat used the term phenomena, wherein it's like the same species, the same thing, because they, I'll grant you, because I haven't researched that deep. I'll grant you that similar stories exist throughout whatever region you wish to talk about, be it worldwide, North America, whatever. But is northern Mexico and northern Minnesota talking about the same thing? Or are they talking about different like groups? Like how do you distinguish those two?
What I would bring up, and if I'm following your question right, let's just to use an analogy, okay? If I live in Wyoming and I hunt elk in Wyoming, and somebody lives in the UK and in the Eurasian countries, they hunt red deer. And I was to communicate with them and say, well, this is what these elk look like. This is the sounds they make. We would assume that we're hunting the same animals, that we're seeing the same thing. And they aren't the same animals. You know what I mean? Very close, but they aren't. And so now we start talking about what's the difference between a northern Minnesota specimen that I'm claiming I'm interacting with versus a specimen in Florida or a specimen in New Zealand or wherever. You know, what are the differences? I don't know. I only research in northern Minnesota. I don't know what those differences
so that was an example, granted, but are you saying that you personally would make the argument that there are different enough? So your example was two different species that don't interbreed. So are you trying to say that is a good analogy to the Bigfoot phenomena, where there is enough variety within Bigfoot that there's separate groups that have been separate long enough that they like want to breed? Or are you just using that as an example?
Well, I believe that.
Actually, let me rephrase that before you answer, please. Is Bigfoot one nationwide thing in the way that like humans or pigeons are worldwide? Or is Bigfoot a lot of separate groups like deer? There's deer everywhere, but not all the deer are the same thing.
Okay. So what I would answer this, and I want to be very careful and make sure people understand that there is no racial motivation or analogies. I don't want to draw an example that people perceive in the wrong way. Okay. But human beings are human beings, and they look distinctly different from each other from different regions. There is no doubt about that, right? And we have distinct differences in our characteristics and our appearances and the way that we talk and different languages and different diets and different cultures. And yet when you break us all down by DNA, it's the same. It's the same. We're all humans. You can tell that this person originated with this clique of people in this country, and you know, ancestry.com will tell me my ancestors are from Scandinavia and maybe Pat's are from a different area. But when you do a DNA genetic makeup on us outside of those differences in the different backgrounds of it, the chromosomes and everything you're going to break down, all the genetic codes, everything, they match. There is no difference genetically between me and Pat when you break it down to a nuclear level on DNA. Or me and you.
You are saying all this on assumption, right? Not on you've actually tested some genetics.
No, I'm just looking. If you took one single skin cell from me, you could break down my whole genome. DNA.
No, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about Bigfoot. Bigfoot's genetics. You're making the assumption that Bigfoot's genetics work this way. You don't have any.
Well, I can tell you this. I don't know the origin, the historical origin of how did Bigfoot come to be. I can't even define what it is other than something that I feel is real in the woods that I've seen that there's a lot of mystery around. When we start talking about a Yeti versus something that appears all white in a northern climate in Russia or China versus here in Alberta or in Florida, what you call a skunk ape, that when you hear encounters, really the tallest that I hear in encounters with skunk apes since I was about 8 foot. And they seem to be more aggressive, right? And then you hear stories about the ones that are in the northern regions. They get up to 10.
No, did he drop out? Pat, you.
Yeah. We lost him.
Aw.
He'll come back.
Oh,
So
his
wait,
internet's kind of scratchy.
I was supposed to be the moderator. So how do we deal with this, Jorge? Talk about
Uh,
something else?
I don't say anything until he comes back. I guess I don't know. I've never moderated either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be like, I'm trying to be like James over here, like the fair moderator guy. I don't want to like interject, dude. You know what I
Would
mean?
you prefer me to be more of a douche so you can practice moderating more? I can try if you
Yeah,
want.
no. See, I already said I did not want a shit show. Hey, you want to talk about flat Earth and why it's flat? Huh? You want to talk about that, Jorge? Hold on,
Oh yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
100%. I'm all
So,
about that.
so hold on. I'll bring you back in a second, Jeff. So, Jorge, do you know that we have visual proof of beyond the horizon of the oil platform out there, whatever it's called, like Blackwater or whatever the hell it is? Do
What?
you not know that? Yeah, or like we can see the oil rig that's 20 miles away
Yeah,
over the horizon. You didn't know that? You didn't know that?
I did know that, and that's fine. We should be able to see that.
Really?
Yes.
Because that's over the horizon. That's kind of weird, man.
I'd like to see the math as to why you couldn't.
Dude. Okay. First of all, dude, bro, you know I'm messing with you right now, right?
I'm well aware. Yes, I'm well aware.
You know I'm not a flat earther, right?
I am well aware. Yes.
Okay. All right, we're gonna bring Jeff back in and continue the discussion, and I'm gonna go
Fantastic.
back into moderation mode because you know what? This is not a shit show, and I don't even have to set parameters or anything, man. You guys are having a good discussion. Continue.
Hey, Jorge, I apologize, Pat. On this iPad, sometimes all of a sudden, boom, my screen goes white and I have to pop back. I don't know what happened.
You're just afraid of the conversation.
Might
man.
be.
I'm so intimidating over here.
Well, I didn't come back waving a white flag. I can tell you that. But, to continue asking what you were asking about the genetic genome of within Sasquatch, not humans, but Sasquatch. If I understand your question right, you're saying, let's say a Florida skunk ape or a Russian Yeti or a northern Minnesota Sasquatch, if you genetically tested them all, would they all be the same? Is that what you're wondering?
So obviously you can't answer that statement.
No, I can't answer it from a scientific point.
But these DNAs had never been acquired, as you were saying earlier, right? So I'm asking what you think they would be if we actually somehow got DNA evidence of all these various regional Bigfoots. Yes.
So you're allowing me to exit the scientific, factual part of this debate.
I'm asking
to bring
opinion.
in my opinion. Okay?
I'm asking opinion. Yes.
Just clarifying, because I'm not going to say anything that I state as me thinking it's a fact. Obviously, you're asking for my opinion. I'll give you my opinion. I think there may be some genetic differences between a Florida skunk ape and a Sasquatch in northern Minnesota. There could be. I don't, because all we're doing is taking, we can say footprints. Some of them have 5 toes. Some of them have 4 toes. So, I mean, obviously there's some differences here, right? In castings, there's something where there may be some mappable differences in the DNA between geographical representations of a specimen, let's say, which would in fact make them different. Polar bears are polar bears, grizzly bears are grizzly bears. Genetically, there's a difference. They mate together, now you've got something in between. And genetically, you're going to see something in between. And so I don't know if there is a difference between a Florida skunk ape, which seems to max out by encounters at 8 foot tall. Their hair seems to be shorter and thicker. They seem to be more aggressive. It sounds to me like when you look at just encounters, people are describing 2 different critters here, right? But yeah.
Hey, Jeff, I'm going to pause you real quick. I actually looked this up. Apparently, polar bears and grizzly bears can mate.
No, I know they can. I know they can. And they do.
Do you know what they're called?
What are they called?
They're called Pizzly bears. I just had to Google that. They're called Pizzly.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
But I know that when scientists have done, they look at the genetic makeup of a polar bear, they look at the genetic makeup of a grizzly bear, and then they take these hybrids and look at it. And now it's curious. was it a male grizzly bear and a female polar bear, or a female polar bear and a male? What was the combination? Because now the mitochondrial DNA is different in that hybrid. And I'm not a scientist, so please allow me to explain, Jorge, that I don't claim to say this is what you're going to see here and this is what you're going to see there. I just know that exists to be where the mating, was it a male or a female from both species, to combine this hybrid. Does it look differently in the DNA? It could. The mitochondrial DNA would look differently if it was a female grizzly that created that hybrid versus a female polar bear. I would think it would look different. I mean, science tells me that it should look different when you consider that in other things.
Yeah.
Past genetic, when you look at all the research that was done years ago, and to some extent people had problems with it, and other people said, well, you can't debate the science that was there just because she wasn't a scientist and was involved in it. But you look at the past DNA work that was done when DNA was nowhere near what it is now. They analyzed that the mitochondrial DNA was a female human and a male primate, and that's how they arrived at these DNA specimens that they tested, right? And now I don't know that. I wasn't involved in it.
Jeff, you may have said this, I may have missed it. What specific female human male primate thing are you referring to?
Well, Pat, help me out. What was the name of that lady that Mary? What was the testing that was done? And I don't know.
I'm asking this because, to my knowledge, I don't know of any genetic sequencing on supposed Bigfoot that's came out to be Bigfoot. There's lots of times they've done genetic sequencing and it's been some sort of pre-existing animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
or unknown animal.
I wouldn't say unknown as much as inconclusive. I think would be the term.
Well, undocumented. But, science hasn't documented yet.
Yeah. So,
but I'm you're in grounds I'm not super familiar with, so I'm going to be a skeptic, right? It's my job to say, where's your citation?
Yeah, there is none. Okay, so there's no verifiable sequencing of a Bigfoot that's available anywhere. So, I'll say that.
All I'm speaking to is there was, and I apologize because I don't know her name, but there was a woman who was involved with scientists who did some DNA testing and sequencing that came out to where when they looked at mitochondrial DNA, it showed a female human and an unknown primate. That's what mapped it out. People debunked it because they said she wasn't a scientist. She was working with people who were scientists. And it basically, that was the origin of the debate on whether or not DNA was even reliable at that point.
So, you're talking about, so again, we're having to go back. I'm going to put on my skeptic cap for this conversation here. You have an unknown named person doing unreferenced.
Well, Jorge, let's just stop right there, okay? Because I'm not a scientist and I don't know who it was. I could easily put somebody else in this seat that could represent that better than I could. And I probably shouldn't have even mentioned it because I don't know.
Well, I'm not trying to be a dick here, right? But it is kind of, if I'm supposed to be playing the other side, it is my job to point these things out, right?
Sure. I totally understand that.
Yeah. So, if I would be interested in this, and also I guess is the implication that some chick got with Bigfoot? Is that the implication here, or that the kid is, or that Bigfoot is part human, part?
I am not making that conclusion. I'm saying that the mitochondrial DNA that's passed on from the mother side in a DNA test showed that it was human mitochondrial DNA elements, and that the rest of the genetic makeup of this, the genome, showed that it was unknown primate.
Okay. So I guess at this point, if you can't.
But I don't
cite
even
a
know
name,
what they
then-
were testing and where they got it from and under what conditions that those specimens came from. I can't represent that. I didn't do
Okay.
those tests.
Okay, so at this point, I would have to say that, barring some sort of affirmative evidence, i.e., this is the name of the person who did it, I don't know where to take this part outside to say that, like, I can't accept that personally.
Certainly, let's put
Right.
it in the same classification as an encounter at that point.
Sure.
It's hearsay, right?
Sure. It's interesting. It's hearsay. That'd be cool if you could provide more, but since you can't provide more, it's kind of a dead end to me.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
So other things I'm interested in, so pretend that this statement is true, which it is. Wood knocking. What is that and why do I care? Or whatever you guys
I don't know what it is. I mean, here's the thing.
Like tree knocking, or what'd you guys say it was? You guys talking about like half hour ago.
Yeah, well,
like you guys are playing like songs to each other or something.
I commonly refer to it as tree knocking. Okay, something
tree
grabs,
knocking. Okay.
takes a stick and bangs the thing, or it could be that they're popping their mouth somehow. I mean, that's a debate.
What is that, and why should I care?
You shouldn't care.
Well,
You if you're scared, why you're asking me? Technically, if I understand your question right, you're asking me if I've stood next to a Bigfoot and watched him tree knock and tell you what he used to make the sound and asked him afterwards, why did you do that and what was your intention? You expect me to have the answer to that. I don't.
That's way more than I'm asking. What I'm asking is you guys talk about it between each other as if it is some sort of positive reinforcement of your pre-established belief.
Sure.
So me as an outsider, tree knocking, what are you picturing it as, and why do you think it helps your case to Pat?
Totally
right? Not to me necessarily, but
I understand your question.
Okay.
So when I'm paddling into an area and I hear something make a sound that sounds like a bat, whatever. I don't know if it's wood, metal, whatever. When I hear something crack against a tree, okay, and I ask myself, what can make that sound? And I can hear it from the left and I hear it from the right. And then a minute later, I hear it from the left and I hear it from the right. That's what I was referring to with Pat. I have to ask myself, what's capable of making that sound? Is it a natural occurrence? Is it a tree simply drying out and cracking? Is it a limb cracking as it falls off? I don't hear them for 20-some trips into this area and back, hours paddling. I don't hear it. And all of a sudden I hear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them in 5 minutes. Okay. So now I have to say, I don't believe that's a natural occurrence. If you're asking me for my opinion, I don't believe it's a decaying tree or anything like that. I don't think it's something that a tree or a wood sound that's involved with a temperature change it's freezing and pulp is contracting or expanding or anything like that. It sounds to me like something alive grabbed something and cracked it against a tree. And when I hear multiple ones left and right moving forward, I have to believe it's some form of communication with each other. And that's all I can tell you. That's all I can conclude. I know a bear can't pick up something and smack a tree and make that sound. I know a deer can't. I know I can go through every animal in that area and it can't.
Okay.
Other than humans.
So the scientist in me would say, again, I played with rocks, not with the woods. So the scientist in me being internet scientist, not actual scientist for this, right? A statement of this is not would require more than my previous experience, right? Like you don't think isn't justification for it is not, right? No. So do you have any sort of justification to me as a third party as to why these sounds you're hearing in the woods are not just sounds in the woods, but in fact directed, purposeful drumming, for lack of a better word? Like, can you provide something more than it don't sound like something I know?
Yeah, well, I don't, if you spoke Japanese, I wouldn't know what the hell you're saying either.
I mean,
But someone would.
I don't know what I'm
But
hearing. I don't know
Japanese
the
is a
reason.
knowable thing to someone.
But
Is there
I
some way
okay,
that you could
so I
verify
get
this
that.
third party even?
So you're asking me if are you asking? I'm trying to understand what you're asking me. Are you asking me if I believe that wood knocking is a form of communication, or even why they would do it?
No.
Or are you asking me if I even
leaving,
think they're doing it?
I'm leaving the point of what you believe, and I'm entering the realm of, again, as the skeptic here, as the person who wants to bring this up. Why should someone who doesn't already believe in Bigfoot think that you hearing trees making noise in the woods is evidence of a form of communication?
I don't know that there were trees making noise in the woods either.
Well, a noise in the woods, right? To me, as someone who lives near the woods make a lot of noise, right? Woods are rarely quiet. So if I don't believe in Bigfoot, I hear random noises, my mind never goes to Bigfoot.
Yeah.
You believe in Bigfoot, you hear, to me, what would be random noises for sake of conversation, and you think Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
One of us is probably right, and one of us has a complete lack of evidence of Bigfoot to support their belief, and the other one has, I would argue, no physical evidence. So why should tree knocks, I sorry if I keep screwing up the word here, why should those knocks mean something to someone like me? Because if they shouldn't, then, right, you're kind of just what's the word here? Echo chamber. You kind of run into an echo chamber thing with this argument.
Sure. Well, I'll say this. I grew up the son of a hunting guide. I've spent probably more time in the outdoors than I have in the indoors, really over 53 years. And I've gotten to a point to where I've heard an awful lot of things in the woods. I still hear things that I'm not sure what they are. And it may not be anything that I would even attribute to Bigfoot. I hear something and say, I wonder what that was. I go through my mind and think, what could it have been? Can't come to a conclusion. It might not have anything to do with Bigfoot. And a lot of those sounds I don't believe do have anything to do with Bigfoot. But when you say one of us is probably right and the other one has a lack of evidence, look, you're arguing that from the standpoint that the lack of evidence, the evidence that brings me to where I stand on the ground that I believe in is my life experience. What I've heard, what I've experienced. Can I explain something that isn't familiar? What's rational in explaining that? And when I go through that process and I start realizing it's occurring in an environment where I've been in that environment and it hasn't occurred in the past, and now it is, and it's doing it in a pattern that seems to be a form of communication. These are conclusions that I draw, and you're not there. To you, it could be complete bullshit. I get that, right? And until you're there with me, I mean, if you were paddling next to me and you heard these things happening, I could easily sit in your chair and say, Jorge, if that's not Bigfoot, explain to me what it is. And you couldn't. You couldn't tell me what that is. So at what point do you say that one side has more plausibility of being correct than the other?
So the plausibility comes from the ability to understand the argument without having to believe someone's telling the truth, essentially. A scientific journal article is going to have data, it's going to have numbers, it's going to have statistics, it's going to have pictures, it's going to have chemical compositions. When I've done research papers, I've said, this is the machine I use, this is how I used it, this is the result I got, here's a picture of the result I got, here's what that result means, right? I went through all those steps. None of those steps required me telling you that believe that I did this, right? Me personally, I could have been a robot for the entire research process and my research wouldn't have changed. But your argument dictates on me believing that you are very knowledgeable of the woods, know enough of the woods to be able to distinguish these super fine things, and distinguish that what you heard is not something else, right? And that's a lot of Jeff. And I'm not saying you are not any of these things, right? I'm not saying
I get that. I get it. I get it's not coming from a personal level. I totally get that.
But at a scientific level, at a like
Sure.
I'm proving a new species level, a lot of this is trust me, I'm good at this. And
Yeah.
that's
Well, hey, I
right,
totally
and that's
get
bad
that.
argument. That's bad evidence, right?
It is bad evidence, but this is why you're asking me to take evidence and present it to you when the evidence isn't conclusive. I don't
Yes.
come on here. If you heard the whole show before we even started this debate, I've told Pat over and over, I don't claim anything to be a fact.
Yes.
I have theories that I've drawn through experience and research, right? I don't claim anything to be a fact because I can't prove it. I don't have a body. I don't have a specimen. I don't have the DNA mapped out from samples that I've collected that I believe. And even those samples, I say I can't prove that factually they are even from a Bigfoot, right? So, you're asking me to scientifically convince you of something that you know damn well right now I can't scientifically do that. I'm in the process of trying to get there.
Well,
Okay.
and again, that's my whole point, right? Is that and Pat says this a lot, right? This is a lacking point, and there is I'm a YouTube atheist, right? I love my echo chamber, but there is a point to where the echo chamber doesn't do any good. So
Sure.
you guys swapping stories about that time, what Patrick Vaughn, like the most oh my god, I'm too drunk to say the word. The most like one of the most vibrant stories of Bigfoot in my head is Pat watching some Bigfoot boobies flop around as he's running next to it. Like he told that story, and that's like my first thing I go to Bigfoot is that Patrick Vaughn saw some Bigfoot titties flopping around. Right? I don't know what Patrick Vaughn saw, but he tells that story with such enthusiasm. He knows the color of them titties' eyes. Like he can describe that stuff better than I can describe my wife. So I don't have a reason. I don't necessarily disbelieve Patrick, but I'm still at that same crux, right? Wherein did Patrick actually see a bare-breasted Bigfoot, titties flopping, running faster than he is? Or did Patrick see something and for some reason he's describing it as Bigfoot? I don't know.
Yeah, but again, when it comes to debating whether or not Patrick is right in what he saw or wrong in what he saw, and you believing whether he's right or what he's wrong in what he saw, doesn't get to be a part of this debate because none of it's scientifically factually based. I mean,
but does the story?
If Pat had a 4K color video of the titty flopping up and down as it ran,
it'd be on
maybe we'd have
Pornhub,
something
right?
else to talk about, right? But I totally get this. I appreciate it's like what I told Pat before we started this. Look, in the end, there will not be a winner and a loser because here's the thing, Jorge. I don't have the science to say, Jorge, look at this. It's proof. Because if I did, I think you're a smart enough individual that you wouldn't be standing in the position of a skeptic if I actually had scientific evidence that was real, right? That you could smell, touch, and taste. And in the same aspect, as somebody who stood in front of one, had a log thrown at me, and I take my life experiences into account, I can't go back to being a skeptic and not believe. My life experience has brought me to the position I'm at. And the analogy I would draw is I don't have any experience with UFOs. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that maybe there's something to it, right? They almost got to be something out there because there's just too many accounts, right? But until you show me a spaceship or a dead alien body or I get abducted by one, right? I could join the live chat in a paranormal show that talks about that. Okay. And I could sit in that live chat the whole time and say, man, this stuff just sounds like a bunch of bullshit. I mean, seriously, come on. This is way out there, right? And then all of a sudden I see one. Or I have an experience in my life where all of a sudden it becomes evident to me that this thing appeared to be real to me. What I saw looked real. This was a real experience. Now all of a sudden I've got different ground. I can't stand on the skeptic. Maybe I can't stand in the position that I have proof that they exist. I'm just standing caught somewhere in the middle, right? And that's where I'm at. That's why I do the research. That's why I can't convince all the Jorges in the world that you're crazy if you're not a believer. I can't tell somebody that. right? But I look at my life experiences and I meet people throughout my life and I analyze and try to look at their, as I get to know them, is this what's their credibility? What's this? I'm cautiously optimistic. I'd love to believe what you're telling me, but I don't know if I can. I've never walked into a conversation with anybody and said, I don't care what they say, I'm going to believe it. Hell no, I'm not that kind of person. So without scientific, I believe that in legend meets science too, that when we take the DNA, analyze at the level we have, I still don't know if I can turn a Jorge into a believer. I don't. But I know that I've got more stuff laying on the table that we need to question and figure out, why the hell is this happening like this? Why did that test show this? Why does this show that? Explain it to me. Is the burden on you to tell me why that test is showing that when skeptics believe that's not to be? Or is the burden on me telling you, if that test is right, how come we don't have a body?
So,
we're caught somewhere in the middle.
Well, so I view us less in the middle, because the questions you would ask me, the vast majority of the time, rely on a situation only you are present to, right? The whole thing we've been talking about with Pat.
I don't know about that. I would argue that.
For example, the DNA conversation about the part human, part ape DNA. Since you can't tell me where that DNA thing came from, I can't respond to it. Right?
Well, here's the thing. I'm not. I could right now make a phone call you back, and say, here's the name of the person. Here's the date the research was done. I could give that to you. It's not that.
Do you have a YouTube channel?
No.
Dang.
Why would I want to start a YouTube channel like all you crazy?
It's pretty gross. I agree. You're a better person for not.
I mean, I've resisted the urge this long. Don't. It's like waving a bottle of beer in front of a person who's on the wagon. I don't do that to me.
Yeah. I feel you, man. Don't start one. They're terrible. So what I would say to that is very simply, do that and tell Pat. Shoot Pat an email. Sure. Pat can post it, and then Pat can send it to me, or I can watch Pat's channel. I'm subscribed. Subscribe to Pat's Squatch Talk. Good channel. And then I can respond, right? So feel free to do that when we're done with this. That way there's something. But I guess to encapsulate this conversation, what is an argument that is not predicated on me just believing someone that it happened, that I could actually talk about, like the Patterson Gimli video? I mean, like what would be an example?
Well, let me say one thing that I've been thinking about what you're saying. It's kind of one of those things, if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget it.
Do it. Yeah, do it.
This whole time, when I tell you something that has led me to the point of believing that this thing is real, okay? When I share something with you, you can come back, and you rightfully so. I'm not criticizing you for doing this. And you can come back and say, where's the genetic proof? Where's the body? Where's the whatever? I get that. That kills basically any argument that I can present to you at this point, if we aren't going to take into account credibility, who the sources are for encounters. We're just going to discount that and focus on the science, right?
Yeah.
But in the same aspect, I can ask you a question like, Jorge, explain to me how 10,000 documented encounters, how all across the world through history, how did cultures throughout time from different areas all get on the same page before we had Wi-Fi and cell phones? How did this become a phenomena that originated from so many points, all pointing at the same thing? And I don't have any way to hold you to answer that, but because
I can try.
We're just going to move on.
I can try. As someone who has degrees in geology, I commonly run into the Noah's flood myth, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm not going to disagree. There are lots of extant cultures, lots of different cultures who have creation myths that involve a flood, right?
Yep.
And the response you make to that statement is, how surprising is it that cultures surrounded by water are going to talk about water doing stuff, right? The idea of a culture that's grew up around the water, around a river that routinely floods, having a story about rivers flooding, destroying things, is not escaping the realm of possibility. So, to expressing that to the Bigfoot conversation, why should I be surprised that cultures that live next to the forest would have stories about things in the forest? Likewise, why should I be surprised that they're human-like when these are humans discussing the stories? Because if you dig down deep, especially with, I can talk specifically about the Noah's flood myths. When you dig into the specifics about the Noah's flood myths, they're not that similar. You have not all of them have boats. Not all of them have families. Not all of them have God doing it. Like the Indian one, which is commonly brought up, has the guy climbing to a hill and it's one dude surviving. You're kind of stretching the similarity of Noah's flood at that point. And it was a turtle that like did the flooding. So I don't know all the various Bigfoot myths, but given my experience with those sort of arguments, the deeper you dig, the less similarities you tend to find. And the less similarities you tend to find, the more likely it is that lots of people that live next to the woods made up stories about humans living in the woods.
Yeah. Well, I guess my answer to that would be, let's stop talking about Bigfoot for a moment and let's just talk about different species that have gotten outside of their niches and evolved into different things. Doug Hychek discovered that squid are 30. There's a giant squid that's 30 foot long. Scientists told him there's no freaking way a squid can be 30 foot long. And all of a sudden he gets one on a video. And then all of a sudden one washes up on a beach and everybody says, holy shit, maybe they do. And then we start researching lake trout. Lake trout grow to 36, 40 some inches, right? And all of a sudden there's one lake in Canada where all of a sudden there's 6 foot long lake trout that weigh 100 pounds. And the world record was like 55, 58 pounds, something like that, right? How did that one lake, that lake trout, get out of its niche and get that big, right? How do white-tailed deer exist, like we talked earlier, and the max weight is like 170 pounds in Alabama, and they're 280 pounds up here in Minnesota. And if you do a genetic breakdown of them, they're the same species. They're exactly the same. Okay, so how does something, if you can believe that something could evolve and get out of its niche in science, and that's been proven in different species several times, about how did this in this area, how did these get this big or this small? How did it get out of its niche? It seems to be the same here, but it's bigger here, or it's smaller here, it's hairier here, it's less hairier here. You start looking at these examples in different species of things getting out of their niche, and all of a sudden, if you can say, okay, well, I see where that has happened in science, but yet I don't believe in Bigfoot. I mean, I can't tell you the origin of Bigfoot, but what if Bigfoot's just, what if it's a freaking human being that simply got out of its niche and quit communicating? I don't know what it is.
So 2 issues I have with the statement. One, we're again making the assumption that Bigfoot exists for this conversation to happen.
Well, no, I'm not making the assumption that it exists.
What you're saying about Bigfoot being
what I'm saying
different
is
niches and all that.
What I'm saying is, how do you qualify the ability to say that it doesn't exist if you can acknowledge that in other species there's examples where they got outside of their niche?
The biggest example.
Go ahead. Yeah, just let Jorge answer the question.
Okay, so the biggest example would be we found these other species. They're not living in very populated, highly tracked areas with people on YouTube having YouTube channels dedicated to having the conversation about finding them, and they haven't been found. So the giant squid lives at the bottom of the ocean.
Sure.
And we found it, right?
Yeah.
So I have no problem with extant species. We find new species existing all the time.
Sure.
But they're like variety of ant that it's no surprise no one ever noticed because in the middle of the Amazon jungle.
Yeah,
we have
it's
big
in one area. It's not
we
all
have
over.
we have
Yeah, I
big
get that.
species that are new. That last year they discovered a new species of monkey, and it's like the size of like like size of the arm. It's like a spider monkey size thing, and it's a new species. But when you look at the picture, it's not obviously a new species. So making the jump from what science does every day of this is a new discovery and it's verified to something as expressly amazing as Bigfoot and the fact that it can communicate by knocking on woods like a bongo, like
Sure.
those are two to me very different statements.
And I would agree with that. It's almost like the same analogy that a lot of people in the Bigfoot community will say, well, hey, look, we didn't realize that gorillas existed, 100 years ago. Jane Goodall goes out, they find these things, and look
Well,
at
I don't think Jane Goodall discovered gorillas.
No. I'm just saying that she goes and advances a study to figure out where all are they existing, how many are there, all this thing.
Okay.
As we learn more about that species, we start realizing that how did we miss this big gigantic thing? Well, the answer would be they were only in this little area, right? They weren't all over like people are claiming Bigfoot to be, right? So I get your argument there. I get that. What's my answer for it? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know how something could exist at the numbers it needs to exist at to support that many eyewitness encounters or types of encounters to exist, the population that there must be, the geographical spread that they must exist at. How did it do that? How did it accomplish that for that much time without there being a body or without the... I totally get where you're coming from as a skeptic, right?
Yeah.
The problem is when I stand in front of one and I have an experience, I can't stand where you are, Jorge.
And we're running that same...
And that's where I have to follow the research and the science to support what I experienced. And you have to look at me and say, let me know when you find it. That's the burden that we're both facing here. I have the burden of proof. You don't have that burden. I get that. I can't explain why they exist. All these encounters are all over. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. How come they aren't more common? How come they don't leave more sign? How come there's not more concrete evidence if there's supposedly that many out there, right?
Yep.
The only argument I would have is they've evolved to the ability to be that elusive, and there's so much remote wilderness that they figure out a way to do it. And if you place the burden of proof on me to show you, prove to me how they do it, I don't know how they do it. I don't know.
Yep. So you are doing a good job of making my argument for me. Thanks. Saves me a lot of breath.
Look, I what I'm being is honest in saying I'm at the point in time where, with my research, with my life experience, with where the science is at, that I'm surrendering the idea that I can't say to you, Jorge, you're a fool for not being a believer. I don't have that evidence. And there's people in this world that even things that are factual, they'll still argue, right? I mean,
of course.
I get that, right? People are passionately subscribed to their theories that there's no turning back, regardless of what it is. My problem is when I stood in front of one and threw a log at me, I'm so passionately subscribed to that theory that I can't unsubscribe to it. And now I'm conducting research to try to bring that to the forefront so that the Jorges in the world can look at it and say, hey, that's intriguing. That's on something. I don't feel the burden to move you off of that skeptical stance that you have. I don't have that burden.
I'll switch the script on you a bit, Jeff. A big tenet of science is falsifiability, right? The idea that what the statement you're making can be wrong given evidence. So, is in your mind, what is a non-Bigfoot explanation to the things that you saw? Like Patrick Vaughn, his big floppy Bigfoot titties. I can't think of anything. But for your particular scenario, can you think of something that would falsify your belief? Like if someone said that's what it is, can you imagine a scenario where that would dissuade you from your Bigfoot belief?
I could tell you that, just like I started this discussion with you, had I not had the encounter, the length of the encounter, the degree of the encounter, what happened to me during that encounter when I was 18 years old, I would likely be standing next to you in the skepticism part. My problem is I've had a life experience where I know what, it wasn't like I seen something blurry from 400 yards away. I mean, it was such a concrete experience that happened to me that I don't get that elective surgery choice to say, do I want to believe or do I not? I'm stuck here. Okay. Because there is no other explanation what happened to me. That bears nothing to you because that's based on my credibility when it comes to affecting you, but it's way more than that how it affects me. So when I had that not happen to me, if I was just to look at my research and just to look at what I hear about in encounters and what I read in the live chat and what I hear Pat's guests say when he has them on the show, I honestly would say that in that frame, I would be capable. I'm not saying that it would be common, but I would be capable to say my life experiences don't support what I'm hearing. A lot of times when I hear people claim this is that, I'd be able to say I don't think that I can support that based on what I've experienced. My problem is I had something happen to me at 18 years old where I know that I'm not in a position where I can back off from that. Because if I am, now I'm going insane because I can't explain what happened. I hope that makes sense to you. I just because this is just based on you're asking me my opinion, and I'm just telling you.
Yeah. Well, I was asking your opinion. Yes. What I got from that is a repeat of the statement. It's my belief. I don't have a reason personally to not believe it.
Yeah.
And that's right. That's fine. That's the basis of belief. That's what belief is. Like I'm reading the definition back to you, and you fully understand. You fully agree with that means nothing to me as a not you, right? So, and you also, I'm sorry this wasn't the dumpster fire you hoping it wasn't, Pat. I apologize.
I don't consider it dumpster fire.
No, not at all. That's the joke. Yeah, we'll be we're agreeing with far more than we're disagreeing on.
Sure.
But I guess, I don't know enough about the woods of northern Minnesota to tell you what you saw and heard, what it could be.
Sure,
I can tell you. I know people that say believe in ghosts because they've heard or seen things. And when I tell them what it could have been, they disagree because they have a firm stance in their preconceived belief of what they saw / heard.
sure.
And to me, right, that is bad because I could see my argument very much fulfilling all your requirements. So I put your belief in the same place I put, for example, ghost beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I can relate to that. I can relate to that, Jorge, because when it comes to ghost beliefs, I can see myself having an experience, hearing something, hearing a voice where I know I'm the only person, or I see something that I can't explain. And I look at that experience and say, I can't prove that ghosts are real, but there's a question mark there for me now, right? Sure. I can't prove that they're real, but I don't know if I can completely ignore that they could be. I mean, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical, right?
Sure.
But I'm not fully saying no, that there's no possible way that could happen. But I'm not capable of saying yeah because I can explain what I saw. I can't explain what I saw there with a ghost, right? So that's easier for me to look at and say, would you be possible to be a skeptic on it? What would it take to be a believer? I don't know. I hear people's accounts. And I think, damn, that sounds pretty believable. This person sounds like they really experienced something. Were they dreaming? Are they losing their mind? What's their mental capacity? Or what was the circumstances, the phenomena that they're describing? And had I been there and experienced, would I feel differently about how I'm perceiving this?
All
Right?
right. So Pat, I got one for you then. Can you explain to me? So you've been talking a lot about credible sources and credible stories. Can you explain to me why the credibility of someone's argument should play weight to this conversation? Like, why is a upstanding citizen saying he saw Bigfoot better than some lesser citizen saying they saw Bigfoot? Like, why does that matter?
Are you asking me or Pat?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
did I say Pat? I meant Jeff. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm not no one talks to Pat. Pat.
I guess what I would look at is, I mean, if I'm answering this as real as I can, I would look at there's a degree of risk in there. What would common sense? In other words, if I'm a law enforcement and I'm in an elected position as a sheriff, okay, and I'm going to come out and say, hey, I saw a Bigfoot in front of me. Why the, even if I'm 100% positive what I saw, why the hell would I tell anybody, right? I'm going to lose my job. I am. More people will not believe me than there are people that will believe me. Why would I do that? Unless I was so convicted to what I saw that I would bring it forward and say, that's what I saw. Now, that's using an extreme example, a sheriff's deputy, whatever. You could say an officer in the military, you could say a forest worker, for potentially losing their income, their career, over making a claim of something that there's no evidence of. And people are going to take their ability to really judge people, whether it's fairly or unfairly, and people who may have control over their ability to be employed or not be employed. Why would they risk it? They'd have to be so convicted to the experience that they went through to risk that and still bring it forward. Now,
Okay.
I don't know how many, if you took all the encounters that there are that have been shared, when you say how many people are in that position versus how many people are, let's say, don't have really that much to risk at all, whether people believe them or not, they're going to live the same life they do. They aren't going to lose their job. They aren't going to, you know what I mean? There's a risk assessment to be, honestly, from a common sense standpoint, looked at and say, why would somebody claim that if they had too much to lose?
My response to that would be a few things. One, right, this is again all there's no data behind this, but
sure,
we can leave that one alone. That's this. How do you data this, right? So never mind. Two, I don't believe that someone who has a conviction would necessarily not state their honest belief. An example along your lines would be a sheriff coming out as, say, Muslim in a conservative community, right? I find it hard to believe someone who has a strong Muslim faith would hide that for fear of not being reelected sheriff. So, and them being Muslim doesn't provide reason to believe in Allah simply because they have the conviction to want to back their beliefs. And then thirdly, kind of along that point I just made, conviction, again, is not evidence of the thing actually existing that they're believing in. Someone believing something plays zero role in the thing actually existing.
Sure. Well, let me share with you something. This is, again, my opinion, and it's based on as real of a life experience as I can get here. And I'm just going to explain to you why I didn't tell anybody for 30 years. I had this experience at 18 years old. And I understand where you're at. That me saying that I had that experience, that's just me saying it. But just let me say that and accept the idea that it's possible, whether we're talking about Bigfoot or not, I experienced something like I did. Okay. Now, after that, I go serve 6 years in the military. I don't tell anybody while I'm in the military. I'm worried I'm going to lose my security clearance. I'm worried people are going to think I'm crazy, right? I don't tell anybody. When I get out of the military, I start a career in real estate where my clients, my credibility is everything when I'm dealing with clients in real estate. Okay. I don't talk about politics on my Facebook page. I don't talk about religion because I don't want clients to view me in the wrong perspective. And I advanced my real estate career to where I own 3 different brokerages in 3 different markets. And I've got real estate investments with partners who view me as being a person that they trust to be in business with. And I'm talking about every dollar that I generate to support my family is based on my credibility. I don't have a union job. I don't have that. I have a career and an income based on nothing but credibility. And because of that, I'm afraid to tell anybody about this. And then I get to be 50 years old and I say, you know what? I've reached a point where I don't give a shit anymore because my job, I've succeeded and accomplished enough where if I didn't make another dollar, I don't care. So I start doing research on my own. I don't go out and tell people my story. I start doing research. And as I'm doing that, trying to answer the questions that explain some of the stuff that happened to me when I was 18 years old to get a better understanding of it, I meet other researchers and I meet other people and I start openly sharing this encounter that happened to me because right now, if you took away my real estate franchise, I don't give a shit. Take it. I've made enough money in it. I don't care. I have 0 to lose right now because I'm done worrying about where I'm going to get paid. Not everybody's like that. A lot of people have a lot to lose when they share. So when you say, I don't believe somebody could be that convicted, I'll guarantee you, nobody gets more convicted than when they're standing 15 in front of one and throws a log at them and it hurts them, injures them in front of 2 of their friends. And they carry this burden of what happened to them because they feel like, I can't tell anybody about it because they're going to think I'm crazy and I won't be able to make any money doing what I do in life. And after 30 years, I finally get to a point where I'm successful enough in my career where I say, I don't give a shit if people believe me or not. If nobody ever chooses me to sell them a home or help them buy a home, I don't care anymore. I'll tell you now, and if you don't believe me, don't believe me. If you want to believe me, believe me. I don't carry any burden to get you to believe or not believe. That's your journey to take. But I'll openly share my experience and I'll share the results of my research that I'm conducting and things like that. But I've gotten to a point where my risk has been diminished based on what I've already accomplished. Most people I have an encounter aren't in that position.
So I take from your statement that at one point in your life you knowingly chose not to disclose your Bigfoot stance because you feared it would hurt you. And at another point in your life, you disclosed it because you didn't care about the repercussions. True?
I was married for 24 years to this woman, and it was 3 years ago that I told her about my experience because I feared that she'd leave me if she thought I was crazy.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to understand my conviction of what I experienced versus being afraid to share it, this is the woman that I should be able to tell everything involving my life. I should be able to share everything with. I was afraid to do it because she'd leave. I thought she'd think I was losing my freaking mind. So when you say, I don't get how somebody could be so convicted to an experience that they wouldn't share it, I don't think you're really properly estimating what somebody could lose if they did.
It's not that someone wouldn't be so convicted that they would not share. It's that you can't make that statement about every single person that maybe have a conviction.
No, I can't. I can only make a statement like that based on my own life experience.
Yes, exactly. You were discussing you as an individual.
Yeah.
And I do not in any way, shape, or form doubt your conviction. But if you want to throw the word science around, you need something more than your personal opinion on how this goes.
Well, but it's not all personal opinion. The one thing I haven't interjected in this discussion or this debate or this, let's say, non-shit show, because I'd like to believe that's what it's been.
We'll try it here.
When you take let's just break it down to little elements, okay? You take a casting of a track and you look at it, and there's dermal ridges, there's sweat pores in it. This is something that scientists look at and say, I don't know how you would fake this. This seems to be a naturally printed casting. I don't get how these sweat. How could you fake that? And so when they vet it at that level and say, we've arrived at the point to where it appears all these technical little details of this doesn't appear to be man-made. Okay. I don't force you to say, Jorge, explain to me how that can be. I haven't done that.
So we're running into that same issue wherein you made a bunch of statements that sound like you have backing to them. And I would like to see that backing because I'm not aware of the situation where a doctor. Well, no, you said a doctor, a scientist saw XYZ thing and couldn't explain it. So therefore, I'm assuming an actual doctor said these actual things, or is this a hypothetical?
Well, let me ask you this: if you Google just the example I just used, if you were to Google Jeff Meldrum and you look at all the pictures of the castings that he has in his office, that he has endorsed as being, these don't appear to be man-made. That there are dermal ridge patterns, that there are sweat pores in these castings. They are not man-made. When you read that, I can ask you, how can you explain
why
that,
are you
Jorge,
making that statement they're not man-made? Who's deciding they're not man-made?
Well, to satisfy you, it's a scientist.
Who?
It's the head of a whole unit. Dr. Jeff Meldrum looks at those prints.
Well,
and says,
I don't believe
these are
you're
man-made.
deeper in this field than I am, so I don't know that story. Doctor something, who, what? Say it again.
Well, it's Jeff Meldrum. Okay, I mean he's kind of the authority in
Meldrum
analyzing these castings and
determining
if they're man-made or not. Yeah, he's with I think it's the University of Montana or Wyoming.
Idaho.
Yeah. He's the head of their he's been there forever too. I mean, this guy's just been, I think that he's probably got the biggest collection of castings there are, that anybody who gets a good one brings it to him. He's kind of the go-to source. Now, this guy, he has looked at a lot of them and said, that one's bullshit, that one's bullshit, that one's man-made. And then he runs into one and says, this isn't man-made. This has evidence here that supports that this was a natural being that made this. This is not man-made. And I look at you then and say, okay, you can ask me, where's the proof? Where's the proof? I could ask you, how do you explain that? I'm not saying that. I won't even jump on Jeff's bandwagon and say that's not man-made. I'm not even going to say that. I'm going to say, how do you explain him looking at it saying it's not man-made? I mean, how would you explain that?
Okay. So, again, I'm going to put on my skeptic hat here, right? I'm not trying to pick a fight or disagree with anything.
You shouldn't be taking it off. Don't take off your skeptic hat.
No, I'm going to say that because, I'm just going to say that. Anyways, quick read up on Jeff Meldrum. I see a lot of heavily criticized, and the rest of the field disagrees with him.
Well, there's a lot of skeptics out there.
Let me finish, Jeff, please. Again, going from that scientific background, right? A big part of science is consensus, repeatability, statements like that. Jeff Meldrum has a PhD. He is way better at this than I am, way better at this than any of us in this room, right? But his personal belief that Bigfoot exists, and this is evidence, has not been backed up by his peers.
Sure.
So I look at that and I say, okay, then we have a dude that believes this, and we have the rest of them that disagree. And there are plenty of people with Deepak Chopra believes ridiculous things about physics, and he has a PhD in XYZ science, right?
Sure.
Deepak Chopra's probably wrong. You and me both agree Deepak Chopra's probably wrong on anything he says.
Okay.
And he has the credentials to back it up. So this one guy having the credentials,
but let me ask you,
but it lacks that other side.
Sure, I understand the point you're making. My question is, when you say you don't believe Deepak Chopra, when you don't believe that individual, I am not going to try to get his last name right, but when you don't believe him, and I say, tell me why you don't believe him, right? Give me the evidence of why he's wrong, right? You can start giving me evidence of exactly why you think he's wrong. You can support that argument, probably factually, of why you arrive at that opinion, right? I
Yeah.
see people that say, I don't believe Jeff Meldrum. I'm also a scientist. I don't know about that. Explain to me, give me a reasonable explanation on that, on a casting that he's saying he thinks is naturally made and it's not faked and it's not man-made. Rather than just saying, I don't believe you, I think he's full of shit, I think he's wrong, look at that piece of evidence and tell me why exactly he's wrong. Nobody does that. Nobody does that.
So I personally, and I think I expressed this at the beginning, I personally cannot do that. This is not my field. I don't know tracked print rocks,
Sure.
whatever it is. I don't know that.
I've never
I
casted
personally
a single
can't say
one.
that. But I do look at his research and I find lots and lots of criticisms of it. So to say that no one has done it would be a false statement, because I need to know, well, what particular thing you're looking at, and is there nothing? Because he has been criticized by his peers. He has been.
Hey,
you can't say he's not been criticized.
I'm not saying he has been criticized. I'm saying that there's a lot of people that criticize him. Scientists have criticized him.
Yes.
But listen, I can listen to Pat make a claim, and I can say, Pat, you're full of shit. And my argument is saying
I'm
he's
fine
full
with
of
that.
shit.
That is full of shit. I agree.
But me saying that carries no weight if I don't address why I arrived at that opinion and explain in detail why he's wrong.
So
it's easy to say I don't believe you.
This conversation leads into a specific at this point, right? You're saying, what the hell is his name again? Jeff Meldrum has a specific claim that you think is good, and then is this the point where we bring up that specific claim? Because Jeff Meldrum saying that he believes this, I counteract with, and lots of people say he's full of crap. So, and then you say to me, you're saying, well, give me specifics. Well, I haven't got the specific of what Jeff Meldrum has said to respond with specifics.
Sure. But I can tell you this, Jorge. Those that don't agree with Jeff Meldrum and want to say he's full of crap, if they had the specifics of exactly why and could factually show why he is, you would have found that in the damn Google too when you Googled his name and found all the skeptics. They would have had the reasons why they think they're full of shit. And there is none. Why?
There is.
That's the simple question.
There is, though. I mean, you go to his Wikipedia page. Source 8 is a gigantic is a 4-page, not gigantic, sorry, is a 4-page PDF of why he's wrong. So they do exist. It's in the Wikipedia article.
Okay,
and
I haven't looked at that. So
this is my first time with a dude too. I don't know how to spell his name. So
I guess what I'm looking at is when you have just using I'm not going to keep resorting back to the same thing, but since we use it as an example, if you have a casting and you have him looking at saying, look, there is a with the dermal ridges, with the sweat pores, with the mid-tarsal break, this is not a human print. This is not a faked print. There is enough evidence here to show that this is naturally made, okay? And you have other scientists that say, I don't agree with that. I have yet to hear a scientist look at that print and say, this is why I don't. Now, their argument will be, because I've never seen a Bigfoot, we can't prove they exist. You're saying this is a print of something that we don't have a body of, that we don't have the DNA genome broke down and base mapped and cataloged. So I can't agree with you. I would agree with that. If that's the basis for them not agreeing, I would say they're right in making that assumption. But look at the print. Tell me how it was made if it was done by man. How did they get the sweat pores? How did they get the dermal ridges? How did they get all this and put it down and bring it to you and say, compared to all the ones that you know are faked, how is this one real? he explains in detail why he believes it's real, and no scientist has looked at that specimen and said in detail why that's not real.
Again,
all they did is stood back and say we can't prove Bigfoot's real, so I can't.
I have to disagree with what you just said. The Wikipedia article on Jeff Moldrum, half the references are people saying this is why he's wrong. So you say scientists haven't went down deep and dirty into it. There's articles on Wikipedia of people going deep and down dirty into it. When I Google, what the fuck did I Google? It's taking forever again. Okay. Go back. There you go. When I Google how to fake a Bigfoot track, I get lots of websites about how people have faked Bigfoot tracks.
Sure.
So, like,
and there's probably been more tracks faked than there are actual natural ones that were found. I mean, if you can concede that maybe natural ones exist, there's obviously more fakes. Just like UFO footage or whatever. Yes. I could search how to fake a UFO thing. It's every paranormal thing. There's probably a how to fake this, and you could even look at it and say UFO I should say clips of footage of UFOs. How many of them are faked? How many of them are verified as being unexplainable, unidentifiable? There's probably as many faked ones as there are as people that can honestly forensically tear apart a video clip and say, I don't know. Yeah. It is unidentified to me. You know, I mean, I think that exists in any paranormal discussion or community or specific topic of anything in the paranormal world, that where do you determine the difference between fake and not? Well, that line is different for somebody who's had an experience, and that line is different from somebody who's a skeptic who's never had an experience, obviously.
Yep.
I mean, it isn't just, that isn't exclusive to Bigfoot. I mean, that exists all across the paranormal spectrum, you know. But in the end, look, I listen to what you're saying, Jorge, and I want you to understand. Like I say, had I not had the experience I had, I can easily envision myself standing next to you asking the same exact questions. The problem is I feel like I'm looking at a complex, I'll draw the analogy. I've got a 17-year-old who's right now working in physics, right? And he gets these huge problems that he has to come out with, right? He has to figure out the answer to. And I tell him, you know what? If you Google that, if you type in that exact problem, that exact rhythm that you're trying to solve, you'll find the answer. And when you find the answer, you still don't know how they arrived at the answer, right? So if you could magically find the answer, now you got to solve the problem backwards and work it back. How did they get to that answer, right? I feel trapped in that because of my life experience and having an encounter that I figured out the answer. I looked at the answer, right? And now I've got to figure out how does that equation arrive to that answer. That's where I feel stuck right now. You look at it and say, I've worked out the equation and I don't believe there's an answer. Or I you know what I mean? I'm stuck knowing my life experience has shown me the answer before I understand how to work that problem through is where I'm stuck.
I very much did not come into this conversation expecting you to leave saying there is no Bigfoot. Right? I would have enjoyed coming to this conversation and leaving believing that there is a Bigfoot. But that I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, I don't think there's ever going to be a Jeff Harding or anybody else who says anything to you or shares experiences with you or shares their beliefs with you that will ever get you there.
Correct. I agree, right?
It won't.
The experience and beliefs, I don't know if it's going to get me there. Yes, I agree.
It'll take a life experience, or it'll take a collection of scientists on agreement that this proves that it's real.
So
that's how you move. That's how you would have.
That is exactly the point, is that second one will do it. I believe in plenty of things I have not physically seen or interacted with. I don't know if I've ever even seen a prairie dog in a zoo before, but I have no problem believing prairie dogs exist. Right.
And I'll make a statement that might be disturbing to some people in live chat, but this is kind of
how I feel. You not believe in prairie dogs?
No,
Oh,
I've shot about 1,000 prairie dogs in South
Oh,
Dakota,
Jesus.
but
Minnesota
yeah,
sounds like a scary place.
and that was in South Dakota where I grew up.
Oh, okay.
But anyways, I look at like I say, my experience. I feel like it gave me the answer before I understood how to arrive at the answer. Right. So now I'm stuck trying to figure out the algorithm, the problem. Right. And trying to work it backwards. Here's what is a mystery to me. As big as the mystery of Bigfoot or any other paranormal spectrum that you could get involved in trying to figure out answers to, when I see people who haven't had an experience, they haven't seen one, they haven't experienced something in a firsthand encounter, okay? And they say, I believe in Bigfoot. I try to put myself in that position. I think, man, I don't know if I could do that. And I know that is going to be amongst a lot of people who believe the evidence. They believe the evidence is there. They believe all this stuff, right? And they've never had the experience that makes it so that they can't not believe. They're stuck believing because they experience. I get why those people are there. But the people who say, I believe in Bigfoot, that have never had an experience that doesn't allow them to double back physically, there's no barrier for them to cross back and be skeptical. I don't fully understand how they stay there in the whole, I believe it. I think there's enough out there. It's not explainable. Well, that makes it a mystery. But how are you a believer when you haven't had something that doesn't allow you not to be a believer? You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I know there's a lot of people in chat will say, dude, I haven't had an experience, but I believe. I'm not saying you shouldn't or that you're wrong. I'm saying that if that was me, had I not had the life experiences I had with an encounter to start with, and then the experiences and the research I've had, if I never had that, I really have a hard time saying factually I believe they exist. I really would have a hard time.
I don't. To me, I think that is a valid point. And I think that your argument lends to my argument, which is
Sure it does.
Bigfoot seems to be purely the way someone took a situation. And that is such a low level of evidence to me. Is the worst evidence you can have in court is personal testimony, right?
I saw.
Yeah, I think I saw, right? That's like the worst evidence you can have in court. So, well, I in zero way believe, Jeff, that you do not 100% convict to everything you believe. Again, we've kind of ran back into each other, wherein you agree with the statement that is nothing to someone like me, and you could be. I have no reason to believe you're not 100% honest and you're 100% genuine. But those statements to your person are meaningless to this conversation.
Sure.
So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Pat, we keep agreeing with each other. This has been the least fiery, least dumpster fire I've been part of. This is.
Well, I will say this. I don't know if we keep agreeing with each other. I'm just not going to aggressively disagree with you on some things. I don't want it to be a dumpster fire. I really don't.
It's not.
It's like, bad YouTube.
It shouldn't be a dumpster fire. Or
I mean, there's people in live chat right now probably saying, Jeff, why don't you say this? Why don't you say, look, I don't want it to go there. I'm respecting your opinion. I'm acknowledging that had I not had these experiences, I could stand next to you. I could see it from that perspective. Problem is I had the experience.
You have these experiences.
I've uncovered what I've uncovered in research. I've seen things and I've experienced things that when I share with you, you have to take at my word, and that isn't good enough. And I don't blame you for that not being good enough. I don't.
Yeah. Sorry, Pat.
Yeah, no, you know what? I'm gonna wrap it up, guys.
I'm tired too, Jeff. I don't know how you're staying up, Jeff. You look old as balls, and like
I am. I'm
the fact
53.
that you're still awake is impressive to me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I take power naps so that I can stay up.
Yeah. I don't do that. I sleep like a human. So
Yeah.
you sleep like a Bigfoot, apparently. So.
Oh man.
Well, I
Hey,
appreciate I appreciate what you brought to the discussion, Jorge. I really
It's
do.
fun talking to you, Jeff. I enjoyed it as well.
Cool. Well, good, man. And yeah, thanks for being here, Jorge. Like, I'm glad we brought you in and had this discussion. You were chomping at the bit, dude. I get it. and here we are. We had that discussion, and we can continue this discussion. Like, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to continue any discussion like this. So,
yeah, I'm sure I'll be back. I look forward to doing this again. So,
Well, and I talked to Pat.
And he talked to me earlier, and he just dropped off.
If next time when you're streaming, Pat, I always like to get on and at least give you a thumbs up for your for the almighty algorithm.
Well, thanks, dude. I appreciate that, man.
But I mean, if I'm in the chat and I'm willing to come out, let you know, and whenever you have me, it's cool with me. So
yeah, it's all situational, dude. Like, it's do I want to bring in the skeptic guy or not? Do I even want to bring in any panel people or not? So it's
completely
all
understandable.
Yeah, it's just all situational, dude. You know how it works, man.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna go to bed. So if Jeff gets back on after I leave, wish him a good night for me, please.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
And good luck hunting all those poor, cute little groundhogs. I'm sure they deserve it or whatever.
You got it, bud.
Exactly. All right. Take care.
All right. Later, bro. Well, that's interesting. That took a turn I did not expect, but it was a cool turn. Because to be honest with you, hey man, like, we're gonna talk about evidence. Let's have a skeptic come on. Like, let's have that discussion. I mean, I told Doug earlier, I texted him, at least. I was like, hey man, people are gonna come after you after this, about this. And so if we can't have the the skeptical side engage with us, then we don't have anything. So if you're gonna bring shit to the table, you better be ready to engage with the skeptics, because they will be there. And yeah, that's about it. That's what I got, man. It was a good night, like, great discussion. And I'm just gonna wrap it up, guys. So thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. No matter what, no matter if you disagree or agree, it's all good. We're all in the same boat, man, at the end of the day. So thanks for watching. I will see you next time.
Let's assume that you've got to this point in the video and you don't agree with me at all. Fine, but I guarantee that this video has been beneficial to you. It will, at the very least, have allowed you to compare your own argument to mine, thus giving you an understanding of the opposite view of the argument. And, assuming you're being honest with yourself and actually paid attention, it will have strengthened your own line of reasoning in preparation for an intellectually honest counter-argument. Therefore, even if you don't agree with me at all, this video will still have been useful to you, even if it only confirmed what you previously knew. If I get defeated here, if someone comes along with a very good counter-argument that defeats mine properly, then great, we've all learned. And if I'm right, great, we've all learned again. But if we don't have the debate because it's artificially shut down, or people complain so much that it persuades people not to take me seriously, we can't learn. We can't find the truth. So we will live in ignorance of the truth. It is therefore in all our best interests to have a debate about this subject. But if the academics or corporations like YouTube or the central state are not allowing the debate, or somehow find a way to call this offensive and take it down, then we won't learn and we'll have a valueless interpretation of